One. Welcome to an intelligent conversation. This is a special edition. For the next 2 hours, we're going to be discussing what's been called the most important election of our lifetimes. We're going to discuss the presidential race. We'll discuss key swing states. We'll be discussing some Senate races, and we'll even do our best to offer some analysis and even make some predictions. This first part of the show is going to be with me, Nolan Dalla, your host and moderator for the next couple of hours, with Matt Lessinger. Matt is actually the creator of the show, An Intelligent Conversation. This is the seventh time we've done this show on many different topics. And Matt said, hey, we've got to do the 2020 presidential election. Everyone's talking about it, not just in America, North America, but around the world. Very, very important stuff. Fortunately, Matt and I are fortunate also to know some pretty smart people, and they're going to be joining us in the later half of the show and going to also offer some predictions. And we'll get to that in a bit. So, Matt, nice to have you with us. We're now going to look at this election, and I know that you wanted to talk about this year's 2020 race. But before looking at what's been happening this year and this past week or month, you wanted to roll the tape all the way back to 2000 and 2016 because you think there's a lot of lessons and maybe some red flags and warning signs about what we can remember, certainly in the 2000 race and again the 2016 race. And I said that later on in the show, we're going to open up this to a much broader perspective with a full roundtable with 4 more guests coming in. So as I said, this is a very comprehensive show. We got a lot to cover. Those of you watching, listening to my voice and Matt's here in a moment on Facebook Live, this will be an interactive exchange. Do please type in questions, comments. We are going to get to those as time permits. Obviously, we're going to get some hecklers. That's to be expected. But we're looking for constructive comments. This is not meant as a partisan show. Many of the people on the show, myself and Matt, probably would lean more to the Democratic side. I think that's clearly obvious. But we also have a conservative or Republican coming on later in the show. So when we talk about analyzing this, this is not cheerleading. We're not sitting here rah-rahing our candidate. This is intended to be analysis and a prediction. And we're all gamblers, so it's where we would put our money if we were betting on the election. So that's a long introduction. Matt, thank you for joining me first of all. How are you feeling going into this this final weekend before the 2020 general election?
Pretty nervous, just like a lot of people, I imagine. Like you said, we are trying to keep this nonpartisan for the most part, even though our political leanings are pretty obvious to people that have listened to our conversations. The main difference between this election and all the previous ones, unfortunately, is I think the integrity of our elections is being called into question more now than ever before. Free and fair elections have always been one of the cornerstones of our democracy. And as the facade of that begins to erode, our actual democracy begins to erode, which is why some of us feel that it's not an exaggeration to say that our democracy could hang in the balance of this election. So clearly it's the most important one of my lifetime. Just from an NBC poll that I saw, 55% of adults say that they're either not too confident or not at all confident about the fairness of this election. And so the headline boldly states, majority of Americans are not confident that we will have a fair election. But that's the truth. With some other polls, it's even lower. There was a Yahoo News YouGov poll in September. Only 22% of voters believe that we will have a free and fair election. That's pretty disturbing. And then they took a poll in Europe where only 10% of people there across 7 nations think that our elections will be free and fair. And their basic message is that since they don't trust anything that comes out of the White House, how can they trust whatever might be said about the results of the election? And the lack of confidence is on both sides of the aisle. In that NBC poll, 65% of respondents who lean Republican think it will be unfair. And just guessing, that's probably because Trump has decried the fairness of elections ever since he won the 2016 election. I mean, I'm sorry, I have to say, how ridiculous was that? I mean, he wanted the results of the election reviewed when he won in a very statistically improbable manner. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. And that 46% of people who lean Democratic think the election won't be held fairly, probably because they know that interference from Russia and possibly China and other countries, that interference is a real thing. It's not some hoax, or at least attempted interference. And then also, pretty often, whatever Trump claims that he's worried about someone else doing, he might be projecting. So it often means it's something he's involved in himself. So we have legitimate reasons to be concerned. The record turnout in early voting is a step in the right direction, but it's way too early to know what roadblocks we'll run into between now and the time that a winner is declared.
There's perception, and then there's reality, and I think that we can even our friends on the right side of the aisle, or the Republicans, will admit, as the United States intelligence community largely concluded after 2016, that the Russians, and perhaps other foreign governments too, to a lesser extent, meddled, and that's a loose term, meddled in the election. And what that generally meant is they were active in disinformation campaigns, a lot of it occurring on social media. By the way, this isn't opinion, this is fact. I mean, even Facebook is, which we're on now, has investigated this and found that there were foreign entities that influenced the election or meddled in the election results. This is not the same thing that we're talking about this year, is it? Or maybe we're talking about that, but that on steroids to a certain extent. You're actually concerned, or are you concerned, with foreign agents or governments actually hacking or getting involved in the process of tabulating results? Are you going that far to say that that's a threat this year in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a threat in 2016. I mean, maybe we'll go back into the history of 2016 in a little bit. I think it's definitely a concern. I think there's more, we're on high alert more now than ever before. So, it's already clear, like, that there's no more facade, right? I mean, it's already clear that we're compromised to some extent. Like, if not in the election itself, then definitely in the misinformation campaigns leading up to the election. We know they exist. We know there's foreign actors behind a lot of them. There's just going to be more scrutiny on this election. The decision of the outcome is going to drag on longer than ever before. So I don't think there's going to be this false bravado, like we tried to pretend in the past that this just wasn't possible, that our elections are always free and fair, and there's no way that some foreign entity could interfere in our elections. I mean, we're past that. We know that that's a possibility. So now I think the time is going to be taken to analyze everything. The outcome of the election might drag on, that might frustrate some people, but I think that's the right path to take. And that's not just for the presidency. I mean, that's probably going to be the case for Senate and representative seats as well.
Well, I know that we're going to be talking about 2016 and what happened there, and its comparative possibilities to this coming election and the aftermath, by the way. We're talking about the interim period, if it's a close election, between November 3rd and the swearing in of a new president, or perhaps the same one, or the re-swearing in on January 21st, 2021. So we're talking about a 2.5-month gap where a lot of things can happen. And you said that you wanted to go back and examine and talk about what happened in the closest election that certainly in our lifetime, where really it was less than 500 votes in Florida that determined the president of the United States. And that was George W. Bush beating Al Gore, not by the popular vote, by the way, but in the Electoral College in the year 2000. Now that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had to intervene and cast a decision that had it didn't have an enormous impact. It actually determined the outcome of a presidential election. Now, I know that you and I talked off camera here, but you think that could very well happen again. History could repeat itself 20 years later. Tell us why.
Well, yeah, so let's go back to 2000 if we could. I mean, I imagine that most people watching us or listening to us are old enough to remember the 2000 election, and we're probably old enough to vote in it. I'm not saying we should constantly dwell on what happened in 2000, but I think it does need to be revisited at least once every 4 years just to remember how completely fucked up that election was. And so let's do it now. Now's the one time in 4 years. Let's revisit it. But I'll try to keep it kind of short. I mean, so first of all, every major network declared Florida for Gore when the polls closed. Even then, networks didn't do that unless the exit polls showed conclusively that there was a clear winner. After that declaration, suddenly there was a huge swath of votes for Bush, seemingly out of nowhere, that did not jibe at all with the exit polls. The networks were forced to retract their predictions. It's still to this day not clear how so many unexpected votes came in for Bush. And that was the moment when I and probably many others were forced to question the legitimacy and fairness of our elections. Even though the origin of many of those votes remains unknown, just let me give you a quick example of what we do know. Like during the unofficial recount, the New York Times did a report that showed that 680 overseas ballots that were tallied were received after the legal deadline. They lacked most of the required information, and many of them were not even cast by registered voters. And they were counted, and they were by a laughable margin in favor of Bush. I mean, that was shady as hell, no matter what side you're on. That is shady. So Gore originally conceded the election, then he withdrew his concession, then he asked for a recount. And that's what led to the Bush versus Gore Supreme Court decision that essentially decided the election. And so this was the timeline of it. On December 8th of 2000, the Florida Supreme Court decided by a 4-3 margin, it was very close, that they would do a statewide recount, noting that there were over 61,000 ballots that the voting machines had missed. I mean, first of all, how do you even miss 61,000 votes? But okay, they had made the decision to recount them. But let's keep in mind that Bush beat Gore by only 537 votes in the original count. So a recount in which it was suspected that the majority of missed votes would go to Gore would probably have tipped the election, but they didn't know that as of yet. The very next day, December 9th, the Supreme Court justices quickly got together and voted as to whether to halt the recount. And all 5 conservative judges voted yes, while the other 4 voted no. And Justice Scalia cited irreparable harm that could befall Bush as the recounts would cast a needless and unjustified cloud over Bush's legitimacy. Those were his words. And in dissent, Justice John Paul Stevens wrote that counting every legally cast vote cannot possibly constitute irreparable harm. And that's the stance I would take, and I imagine you and the majority of people would take that stance as well, that we want every vote to be counted. So 3 days after halting the recount, they officially decided, again by the same 5-4 vote, that no recount would take place, with the conservative majority claiming that there was no way that the recount could be done legitimately. That sounds awfully like Trump today, like trying to make the claim that some sort of recount could not be done legitimately, and that was said without evidence. But that was the stance that they took in making their decision. And that decision allowed the previous vote certification made by the Florida Secretary of State to stand for Bush, and he therefore won the election. Later on, the ballots were analyzed unofficially, and it was found that a full statewide recount would have resulted in a Gore victory. And because of that, Florida subsequently changed to new voting machines to avoid punch cards, which had allowed dimpled cards or hanging chads, if you remember that bullshit. But it's too late. I mean, by then the damage was done. That Supreme Court decision, I'm not an expert enough to say this, but in my mind, that Supreme Court decision was probably the most partisan decision that had been made to that point, and possibly it still is. It probably damaged the reputation of the court beyond repair, since we now see the judges as partisan rather than impartial. I mean, we consistently talk about the conservative judges versus the liberal judges. That's not how it was ever supposed to be set up. It also began our distrust in the integrity of elections, which I discussed earlier. And Justice Stevens even predicted that in his dissent, that said the decision was going to lead to a distrust in our electoral process. So, I mean, we can't forget or ignore this decision as being a huge step in bringing us to where we are today. I mean, imagine how different things would be, again, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, how different would things be with 4 or 8 years of a Gore presidency? Right? At the very least, he would have been a pioneer in fighting climate change. We know that. I mean, how different would that have been? But I mean, it's really impossible to go on about what the ramifications would have been. I mean, maybe it would have led to a backlash and then we never have an Obama presidency. I mean, there's no way to know exactly what would have happened, but we know that the course of American history was changed. And so that leads us to today, where if the results of the election are in question, and at this point, I sort of get the sense that that's all Trump is hoping for at this point. Like, I think even he realizes it's unrealistic to declare victory on election day. He just wants to declare that it's in doubt, and he wants it to go to the Supreme Court. And with the current 6-3 conservative makeup of the court, when you include Amy Coney Barrett, who was just put on the court, if they decide to make a judgment in favor of Trump, whatever judgment that may turn out to be, right or wrong, if they make a judgment that puts Trump in 4 more years of the presidency, our faith in the Supreme Court will pretty much disappear entirely, whatever faith we still have. So that's where we stand today. I don't think it's pretty, again, no matter which side of the aisle you're on.
You know, I would only add to what you say, as you talked about what a watershed year that 2000 was in, you know, so many ways, politically, legally, changing the course of history. As you mentioned, I also think it's worth noting that that's probably the time when Republicans recognized that the only way for them to win a national election is really to openly suppress the vote through dubious means and not so dubious. In other words, there are legal ways to suppress the vote, is what I mean. And that's what they immediately began doing, because the demographic shifts in this country that have been happening over the course of the last generation does not favor the Republican Party. It's becoming certainly more liberal on all social issues, certainly more ethnic and more minority driven. Minorities will be a majority, as you know, within the next decade or two in this country, and already are in some states. So all of those kinds of just demographic shifts made Republicans recognize that they had to, you know, get down and dirty and do some things that were, you know, to be quite blunt, not very democratic, and that's very troubling. The most interesting thing to me, though, was to see the evolution of how the Republican Party. This is not, by the way, meant partisan. I think even Republicans largely would concede these points because they really are irrefutable. If you were to watch, though, Fox News and view conservative media, say after the 2008 election, where Obama, the Democrats won the House, Democrats won the Senate, won full control. It was an absolute slaughter for the Democrats over the Republicans in 2008. And a lot of Republicans recognized that they had to do something. And surprisingly, at that time, they recognized that maybe the way to victory, or getting to get back into, you know, controlling the House, the Senate, and maybe the presidency, was not through so much suppression. It was through inclusion. Go back and watch Fox and Hannity and conservative media and read how pro-immigration they were around 2011 and 12. It's all there. they actually recognized that they could not sustain the majority coalition that had gotten them to where they were. And so they were actually, they had their eyes open, and I think were very forward looking for a very brief period. The clouds parted, the sun shined through. Then all of a sudden, Steve Bannon comes on the scene. Stephen Miller, the president's closest, one of his close advisor, comes on the scene, and then Frank Luntz, the pollster. There are other people too, but this cabal basically came together and formed, taking essentially Tea Party ideas, which was very nationalistic, very America first oriented. This is before anyone had heard of Donald Trump as a presidential candidate, by the way. This completely sets the foundation for Donald Trump to basically get on this foundation and leap forward and become essentially the guardian or the essentially the personality that took all these ideas and then ran with this America first, make America great again, nationalistic, popular nationalism, very populist oriented thinking. And so it's very interesting to see this evolution of how the Republican Party has changed. The Democratic Party largely has been pretty much, since they cast aside conservatives, really the George Wallace conservatives, this old Southern Confederate conservatives about 50 years ago, the Democratic Party has been consistently slightly left to center. I think people would acknowledge that. Now there's certainly a more progressive wing, but the Democratic Party really fundamentally hasn't changed all that much in the last the last 30 or 40 years. The Republican Party, though, has gone through some enormous ups and downs and changes. And by the way, I'll lead into this. We can't forecast what's going to happen because everything depends on Trump winning or Trump losing. And in case there could be an entire, reset button hit by the conservative movement, by the Republican Party, what have you. We really can't get to that. And I've heard people already talking about hitting the reset button and where do the Republicans go from here if things don't go their way on Tuesday. Very long introduction and a way to ask you, is it too early to be thinking about the Republican Party, its future direction, and if they're going to hit the reset button?
It is. It's too early because, like you said, I mean, two entirely disparate directions, whether Trump wins or loses. I mean, and then you have the Senate, which is very hotly contested, the control of the Senate, and that's going to play a large part too. And we don't know. A lot of it's also going to come down to what happens in the next couple of months, right? Not just who wins, but how we get to the point of deciding who wins. Like, how contested is it going to be? How contentious? What is our country going to be dragged through until we get to the point that we know exactly who's the president and what's the composition of the Senate? So yeah, I think that's putting the cart before the horse. Like, let's get through the elections first, and then worry about how the Republican Party might reinvent themselves, which I think a lot of people hope that they do on both sides of the aisle. I think we can agree. We've had this discussion before. We can agree with certain Republican principles, like it's really Trumpism that we have the greatest issue with. It's like, put Trump aside, and then maybe you can get back to some bipartisanship. I mean, this is maybe a slightly off topic, but I mean, I'm not happy with the fact that, like, the left is forced to villainize senators like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney. They're pretty close to center. That's what we want in the country. Like, we want people close to center. Like, if you're upset that they made certain decisions that leaned, conservative, well, that's no surprise. They're conservatives. Like, it's okay that they did that, but at least they're rational thinking for the most part. And like that's what we need on both sides. So the way that they're being vilified, I'm not happy about that. And that's obviously happening in both directions. You have a Democratic senator in West Virginia, which is, a rarity, and he's being vilified by, the Republican Party. It's like, really? You want to vilify him like he's as conservative a Democrat as you're ever going to have. So, can we get back to some form of bipartisanship? I think most of us hope so. And a lot of that's going to depend on the outcome of this election. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Matt, in 2016, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in the popular vote by about 2.5 million votes. And by the way, forget about all these charges of voter fraud, what have you. She won the popular vote. That's clear. Now there's talk that for Trump to be defeated and accept the results, there's this a theory that if he loses badly, I don't know the number, by the way, but let's make it up. Let's double it. Let's say he loses by 5 million votes or more. Well, you really can't even make a case that there will be a small contingent of lunatics. But I mean, generally, most people are going to acknowledge that he got his ass kicked by 5 million, maybe 6, 7 million votes, and he has no real legitimacy to contest the election and really hold on to power and maybe fight in the courts. This is, by the way, I think the consensus viewpoint on why Democrats are thinking we've got to not just win, we got to cover the spread by 2 touchdowns. That's kind of the thinking here, where there can be no wiggle room for any objection. Are you buying into this theory? Or are you maybe a little more pessimistic and maybe cynical to the point you think that we're just in for a dogfight no matter what the outcome?
You know me, pessimistic? Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't think he's going to give a shit about the popular vote. I mean, he is, in the sense that his ego is going to be hurt. But if he narrowly wins the Electoral College, but loses by 5 million votes, he's not going to care. I mean, can we go back to 2016 for a second? Okay. Sure. So, I mean, everything that went wrong in 2000 was shelved for the next 3 elections, right? Because in 2004, Bush won pretty clearly. In 2008, 2012, Obama won pretty clearly. It sort of reminded me of the college football playoff system, right? Where it's like, for the longest time, you had the top 2 seeds went to the championship game. And it's like the powers that be just prayed that there would only be 2 undefeated teams so that the system continued working, and then finally they caved in. It's like for 3 elections, they didn't have to worry about much because the election wasn't contested. So it's like all the problems that existed, they never really addressed them. So then you get to 2016, and just to throw out the numbers, right? Gore won the popular vote by 544,000 votes approximately, and he lost by 5 electoral votes. Trump lost by 2.87 million votes and won by 77 electoral votes. Not even close in the Electoral College, and also not even close in the popular vote, but the other way. Is it possible for that to happen? Of course, because it happened. It's extremely statistically improbable. I think people need to recognize that for all the talk about, oh yeah, of course you can, win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College because it happened to Gore. Yeah, it happened to Gore, but not nearly to this extreme. And even as the results were coming in on election night, I'm just being honest, my bullshit radar was on high alert because every close state that Trump needed to win, he won by the slimmest of margins, right? We're talking about Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, all very close races, all ones that he needed to win, and all went to Trump by just enough.
I think the entire, all the states you mentioned, I think you can throw in, maybe it was Pennsylvania too, I don't remember, but 67,000 votes, by the way, determined the outcome of the election in those 5 states or something. In other words, right. It's 67,000 votes gone the other way. Trump would have lost badly, really.
Right, exactly. And so there's a lot of people, whether they vocalized it or not, that suspected something. But it's interesting what happened in the aftermath. If you remember, I mean, Obama took the high road. He dismissed any talk of foul play. Clinton didn't call for any kind of recount. You remember who called for a recount? It was Jill Stein, right? The third party candidate. She obviously had no chance of winning, but she tried to call for a recount to see what the hell was going on. And that was blocked by the courts, which were largely conservatively controlled. let's just say hypothetically, I'm not trying to get too deep or conspiracy theorist here, but let's just go down this road with me. Let's say they did find evidence, as an example, that Russian hackers or any hackers padded the vote count in the contested states. Well, then what do you do with that information? Like, can you go public with that information? I mean, I don't think so. Like, we would lose all faith in the electoral process, right? We would lose all faith. It would make the United States look weak. It would make the Democrats look like they were crying sour grapes, just like it might seem like I'm sour grapes now. But I think it's a legitimate conversation to have, especially looking forward to this election. If they had found actual tampering with ballot counts, what do you do with that information? I think in 2016, you pretend it didn't happen. And you try to punish the perpetrators going forward. And of course, that didn't happen to Russia under Trump's watch, even though some lesser officials were still trying to make that happen. So now fast forward to today, as I said earlier, I don't think there's a repeat of that. I hope. If there's actual tampering with ballot counts, I think people are going to call that out and risk, running the risk of losing faith in our elections, because as those polls suggested earlier, we've already largely lost faith in our elections. So how much harm is it really going to do if somebody goes public and says, you know what, we witnessed ballot tampering here? And real ballot tampering, I'm not just talking about like 9 votes that were dropped in a warehouse somewhere. I'm talking like thousands of votes that clearly favored one candidate over another. I have a little more faith that that will be brought to light now than it would have been in 2016. But obviously the pessimist in me and in a lot of people is still worried that some shady stuff could go on that we'll never find out about. And you just have to cross your fingers, place your vote, and just hope that it's being counted correctly. What else can you really do?
I'm Nolan Dalla. We're talking to Matt Lessinger, usually my co-host on An Intelligent Conversation, a special edition, election 2020, 3 days away. We're going to be bringing in 3 or 4 perhaps guests. We're going to broaden this discussion quite a bit, a lot more perspectives. Before I do, thank you for those of you watching and listening on Facebook Live. It'll be posted later on YouTube as well. We've got a number of questions. Let me throw a couple at you, Matt. I don't know the answer to this. Somebody's asking, when do we get to spike the ball? And I think what they mean is assuming that there is a definitive victory. Well, even if the networks announce, let's say Biden wins, just like you said in 2000, especially if it's somewhat close, you really can't be sure. And I know obviously the Electoral College meets in December. Do we have to wait really until the Electoral College meets and we have a definitive moment to say that, hey, it's over, there's no way that there's going to be any more shenanigans? Or can we maybe, again, if things were to go the Democrats' way, could the supporters of Biden pretty much breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, they won or we won? What do you think?
Do not breathe a sigh of relief until Trump is physically out of the White House and Biden is physically in the White House. That's when I'll spike the ball. Before that, forget about it, because I mean, a lame duck session for any normal president, like they're going to pass some legislation or do some things that the other party's not happy about, but it's always been understood as part of politics that the lame duck session could be used in that manner. Trump is going to abuse his power. I mean, if it looks like Biden is going to come into office, I have no clue what the next 2 months holds in store for us. And I mean that. I mean, Trump has already just abolished the norms to such a ridiculous extent. Like, I don't care if Biden wins by 10 million votes. Like, until he physically leaves the White House, do not spike the ball. Do not take your eye off the ball. No, there's going to be some shady shit that's going to happen one way or the other, right? I mean, it might not mean that, it's going to change the outcome of the election, but, certainly any number of laws and things could be shoved through the same way that Amy Coney Barrett was shoved through. And he's got 2 months to do it. Yeah, no, don't. The game's not over until Biden is sitting in the White House. So that would be my answer.
Well, good answer. Let's open it up to some more guests. We're gonna go ahead and let them into the room. Let's hope that they can join us here. We got Larry Greenfield coming in. Hopefully, Dr. Arthur Reber as well. A couple other guests will be coming in shortly. Let's add them to the mix. I'm Nolan Dalla with Matt Lessinger on a intelligent conversation. We're talking about the election. We're going to broaden it up to at least 4, 5, maybe 6 people coming in here in just a moment. Let's hope that they're with us. They may have to work on their we may have a little bit of a sound check here. We'll see how things go. And there's Dr. Arthur Reber. Thank you, Art. And there is Larry Greenfield. Excellent. Intelligent conversation. We're talking about the election. I'll go ahead and let them do at least. Gentlemen, please crank up your volume to full speed. Full speed ahead on the volume. We need to have you on max volume. Crank it up, please, so we can make sure we hear you. We don't have to strain. Coming in here in just a moment. Let's hope that they're with us.
I think you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Nolan?
Yeah, good. Vin,
Okay.
you're there? Good. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Hey, Matt.
Good, very clear. Larry, give us a sound check, please.
Hi, gentlemen. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
There is an echo from somebody's speaker, like we're hearing Nolan on repeat, so I'm not sure who that is.
Okay, let me take that down. Thank you for letting me know.
Matt,
That's better. Yes, hi, Arthur.
in 2000 in
I think you can hear me,
Florida,
right?
there's another element to it.
Okay.
It had to do with the design of the ballot in Broward County. And there was
Good.
an
Vin,
insane,
you're
an insane number of votes for Pat Buchanan. Now, this is a county that's liberal, and it's a county that has a very high Jewish population. And Buchanan is not exactly a friend of the Semites. And yet he had a huge number of votes. And it was because of the design of the ballot. Because Gore's name was second on
Happy
the
to be
list,
here.
but Buchanan's name was inserted, the bubble. The name was on the right side of the ballot. And it was Bush and Gore on the left side. And so tens of thousands of people voted for Buchanan thinking they were voting for Gore. And when a couple of psychologists who have some pretty good quantitative chops sat down and broke the vote back down again, where they gave Buchanan not the number of votes he got, but balance for how he performed across the entire state. And they made the correction. And Gore wins by like over 100,000 votes. It's not even close in the state of Florida.
Jeez.
Well said, Arthur. So, Arthur, thank you for bringing in that perspective on Florida. I think we're going to go with this great fivesome we have here. Whoever's got their microphone on or the Facebook Live on, just turn your Facebook feature off, please. I think someone's bleeding into the broadcast, and I don't want to hear myself twice. If I hear myself once, I go crazy, and nobody wants to hear Nolan Dalla twice. So be sure and silence your Facebook, gentlemen. And let's get started. What a great view, a great group of experts here from different perspectives. Our Dr. Arthur Reber, you just heard from him. Vin Narayanan is with us. He's on the bottom square there at Hollywood Squares. I think you're in Baltimore today, isn't that right, Vin? So once I go,
I am in Baltimore, and I'm clearly losing the bookcase battle here. I've got to do something to rectify that.
what a great! You just memorized all your books.
There's an awful lot of background noise.
Different perspectives. Our Dr. Arthur Reber, you just heard from him. Let's see if I can work on that. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me.
That's better.
He's on the bottom square. Is it better? Hollywood Squares.
No, now we're hearing the
I think
repeat.
you're in Baltimore. Is that a little better? So once I go,
I am in Baltimore.
well, I'm not sure what to do here. Anyway, so let's go on and continue. We've been live here at Facebook. So Larry Greenfield, thanks for joining
Now
us
we're
as
hearing
well.
the-
You're going to be our token conservative in this motley crew. Again, keep in mind that this discussion is not partisan. It's not to cheerlead our candidates, whether they're at the presidential election or the Senate level. We're here to analyze things as best we can. And that's why everybody here was chosen really for different reasons. Let me get straight to each of you. Dr. Arthur Reber, you spent your academic career largely talking about or studying, psychology and the psychology of why people do what they do, why they behave like they behave. Get into the mind of the voter who's undecided right now, and please explain that one to me from a psychological perspective. Dr. Arthur Reber.
I don't think I have any special insights to hand to you. One thing I think is pretty clear is that the overwhelming majority of the voters have made up their minds. There are very few people that are still sitting on the fence. Trump is a polarizing figure. And so you either embrace him and you're with him, or you feel differently, and usually with considerable passion. So I don't think much is going to happen to make things break in one way or the other. Right now, all of the polls show Biden ahead, and 538, who is where they're famous for amalgamating all the polls and getting an underlying average, now has Biden at 0.90. Now, this is an interesting number, because about a month or so ago, 538 had him at about 0.65, 0.7. And Nate Silver, who is the head of the group, was asked, why is it so low? And he said, if the election were held tomorrow, it'd be 0.90. What they were doing was keeping it low because there was still a month, 6 weeks to go, and all kinds of things could happen. And so they didn't want to make any hard decisions or push the numbers further than they thought they should go. So what we're seeing now in a 0.90 is not necessarily meaning that there's been a switch over to supporting Biden. It's that we're closer to the election, and so there are fewer opportunities for something weird to happen. So I think that's probably what's going on. If you take a look at the betting sites, betting markets, I'm sure Matt has been checking out betting markets. They're interesting, and they've been moving. And over the last week or so, they've been moving in the same way that 538's estimates have been moving. So that they had him, Biden, at minus 160 just 10 days ago, and then again back in September, and he's now at minus 210. So that's a pretty solid favor. They also have the Senate going to the Democrats, and that's pretty strong as well. Again, the polling sites have him it's up around 0.7, 0.2, 0.75 that they will capture the Senate. And there's some surprising states that are in the mix. Texas is in the mix. Texas right now is within the error measurement of error of polls. It's down to about 1 to maybe 1.5 points in favor of Trump, but the polls usually have a plus or minus 3. So it's a toss-up at that point. And again, some other surprising places. Iowa could go for Biden. Ohio could go for Biden. And almost everybody now has Florida strongly in Biden's camp, and they have Georgia in Biden's camp. And the two Senate seats that are up in Georgia, they're both leaning slightly blue now, which again is remarkable. And a lot of this has to do with immigration. A lot of people have been moving to Georgia over the last decade, and a lot of them have been moving to Atlanta. And so they're getting caught up in the big city culture, and that's pushing them more to the blue side of things. So that's pretty much the way it is. I'm not betting. I don't like to wager unless I'm pretty damn sure I've got a crystal clear edge. But I am observing. I am watching everything very carefully.
Well, we played poker with you, Arthur. We've seen you move all in with a pair of threes before. So don't give me that BS
sure.
about betting on sure
things.
Okay?
You're playing ducks. I'm coming over the top.
Larry, I know you're Larry, I know you're like a raging racehorse here, wanting to run in the Kentucky Derby, but I'm going to hold off on you and let you clean up. Let's talk to Vin first. Well, then we'll go to Larry. Vin, like myself, you're a Washington D.C. guy. You spent a lot of time working there, and you wrote for USA Today. You were a political writer and editor, so this is right in your wheelhouse. What are your thoughts here 3 days before the election?
Well, I got to admit, I am glad I'm not sitting on any of the decision desks I used to sit on, because I was on the decision desk in 2000 and 2004 calling races, and that wasn't fun back then, and it would be even less fun right now. So let me sort of key in on 3 points. So what does it mean to be a 90% 90% chance of winning? And this is a really important point. Yeah, I mean, that Dr. Reber brought up is a 90% chance.
Stop
is not
calling me
a lot.
Dr. Reber. Please.
Huh?
Arthur is fine.
Arthur?
Call
All
me
right, fair
Dr.
enough. That Arthur brought up because people get confused by 90% being a near certainty, and 90% isn't anywhere close to being a near certainty. To think about it, the way sort of 538 posed it on their website is that it rains about 10% of the time in downtown Los Angeles, which means it's raining 38, 40 days of the year. It does rain. It's not an oddity for there to be rain in Los Angeles. So this isn't a statistical lock. Another way to look at it is my Michigan State Spartans were a 25-point underdog entering the game against Michigan today.
Of course, you've got to get that in.
Of course, and Michigan State won. And so that was more like a 99% certainty for the University of Michigan and won. So it's nowhere close to a lock. Strange things happen. And a lot of the polls are within the margin of error. Especially within the battleground states. So that's the first thing I think that's really important to say as a vote counter is this is far from over. The second thing is just a tip on how to watch the election coverage coming up on Tuesday night. The old models in the way we used to count votes and project winners don't work in this election because we've had massive voter turnout. Massive early voting, massive mail voting, all that sort of stuff. So the old way to do it was you would look at, all right, where the votes come in, what percentage of the precincts are left, what does that county lean, what are the districts lean, what is the likelihood of someone winning or coming back to winning based on that. That's not going to work this time around. Because what's happening is we're counting votes in different ways. I mean, so we're going to have early votes coming in, and in some states, those early votes are going to mean it's going to be a heavy Democratic vote turnout, and you're going to see Trump's numbers rise later in the night. In other states, it's going to be Trump gets a huge lead, and you're going to watch Biden's numbers come slowly in. And so the fact of the matter is, the way we used to project races doesn't mean anything anymore. I would be very suspicious of early calls by the Associated Press. I love the Associated Press, but we didn't call Florida and we didn't call Pennsylvania in 2000 because we were suspect of AP's methodology. We were right and they were wrong, and they've got some methodology issues. So that's the second thing is the right way to watch election night results coming in is comparing things to the 2016 races. So what you want to be looking at is President Trump outperforming his numbers in certain states? Is Vice President Biden outperforming his numbers in certain states? And what are the margins with which they're outperforming? That's going to give you a much better indicator on what's going on than the usual precincts in and percent of the vote left and all of that sort of thing. So if you're looking to do that, that's the final thing. And the final thing is with this 90% thing, there is one thing that is distinctly different in 2020 than 2016, which is the nature of the polling, and the results of the polling that we're getting are very different this time around. The pollsters have done a much better job of counting Trump voters in that in 2016, they got the models completely wrong. But they got them wrong mostly in the upper Midwest. If you take a look at Florida and New Mexico and Arizona and other places, the polls were dead on. In the upper Midwest, they vastly undercounted white working class voters. Now I think they're doing a better job of doing it. Where the real uncertainty in the polls come in is that there are a lot of people telling pollsters, we're not telling you who we're voting for. That number is significantly higher than it was before. What I've been seeing in the numbers is it's sort of breaking down roughly even between Biden and Trump voters. But I'm inclined to believe there are going to be more Trump voters than Biden voters telling you who they're not voting for. And the other real big difference is, and Arthur brought this up, is the number of undecided voters in this election, at least according to the polling, is significantly smaller than it was in 2016. So that late breaking surge of voters that you saw go to Trump, that cohort just doesn't exist, which sort of gives you more confidence in the polling numbers as they exist right now.
Good. Excellent analysis.
Good,
We're
thanks.
going to, by the way, the first question out of the box before we go to Larry here, sorry, after we go to Larry, is talking about the hidden Trump voter. That's a very important topic that's going to deserve a roundtable question to all of us here in just a moment. So hold that thought, please. Great point, great analysis by all of you. Larry, you've been sitting here listening to all these four liberals here chew up on Trump. Your reaction, and then tell us, what is the path to victory for Donald Trump?
Well, thanks so much. Howdy, everybody. And Matt, nice to meet you in particular.
Yeah.
And I've listened to all the intelligent conversations. So thank you very much for including my voice in this one. And nice to be with the whole panel. A little bit of response and reaction to your earlier segment with just Nolan and Matt. I liked a lot of the points you all made about 2020. I particularly liked what you said about the future of the Republican Party, that it will be in flux. I would just add that I think the Democratic Party also will have some internal challenges. If Biden were to lose, I could imagine that some of the progressive wing would say, we're done trying to find a establishment figure or a left of center centrist type person. So I do think American politics in general is in for a rocky road going forward. You guys also mentioned the immigration issue. I thought you were spot on about that. There was a shift in the Republican Party from seeking to kind of welcome immigration and grow the minority vote to a kind of Trumpian policy of concern about border and also sanctuary cities. And but I don't think the Republican Party has abandoned respect for legal immigration. So there I would bring in a nuance. I don't think it's fair to categorize the Republican Party as hostile to immigrants or minorities. In fact, you'll see that Trump's vote will go up, I suspect, potentially, in the Black vote and the Hispanic vote. So I wouldn't think it would be fair to say that Trump's first 4 years, his first term, his presidency, was hostile to minorities. And I think analysis will show that Joe Biden actually struggled a little bit in the Black community with some of his statements and previous policy, and that President Trump did make some inroads in the Black community with the First Step Act and criminal justice reform and money to historically black colleges. So one important note I'll add is that if President Trump does better in the Black and Hispanic vote, that could swing a couple of the swing states. So the second point I want to make is regarding the election and answering your question directly, Nolan. Is there a path to victory for Trump? I believe the polls are wrong. I believe they were wrong in 2016, and I believe they've been wildly wrong again this year. I believe it's a gang up. I believe it's bias. I believe it's being presented by the media in a very unfair way. And I think you're going to have a lot of nervous people and crying on election night. I get emails and notes from the internal polling on the Republican side, both Senate races and for the presidency. And the race is a lot closer than an hour ago, Saturday, today is the 31st, Halloween. CNN was saying Biden has a 12-point lead in Michigan. That's not what I'm reading in my literature. Why do I feel confident that the polls are so wrong? The approval rating of the president is 52%. And that's by the same pollster saying that he's down by 4 or 8 or 10 in various states. Well, that doesn't equate to a big electoral loss if his approval rating, which has been as low as 37, 38% in the past. Number two, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? He's at 56%, the president. And there may be variations in some polling on that, but it's certainly a higher number than even Ronald Reagan was when he ran for re-election and won 49 states in 1984. he was at 44%. Are you better off than you were? And this is even during COVID. Next, the GDP report came out on Friday. 33% GDP growth in the third quarter. The mainstream media, I'll say, of course, you don't have to agree, didn't publicize that too much. It didn't get a lot of airplay, but the economy is on a V-shaped recovery. I'll stipulate there's many problems in the country, including the pandemic. I get that. But the economy is doing sharply well compared to where it could have been. You know how we know? Because if it wasn't a good economic report on Friday, we'd be hearing about that from Democrats all weekend, and we're not. So there are indicators to me that the president is doing better among the populace than the media is letting us know. In Florida, this is a very specific, but I think a very important point, because Florida is a very important swing state. The registration is much better for Republicans than it was 4 years ago. The Democrats had a 300,000 or 400,000 vote registration edge in Florida in 2016. And the president won Florida by something like 100 or 120,000 votes, something like that. But now the voter registration for Democrats is only up 100,000 and change. And apparently, from what I'm reading in the last 24 hours, Miami-Dade County is not swinging near as far for the Democrats as it needs to build a lead, because the president picks up votes in the rest of the state. That's a big Democratic county. In Pennsylvania, the perfect storm against the Democrats, it appears to me. The fracking issue, the energy economy, the America energy independence kind of celebration by the president, Republicans, and some in Pennsylvania, versus Biden's very clear statements that they caught on tape and now show at every Trump rally that he is against fracking and Kamala Harris is against fracking. Whatever you think about fracking, it's not a good idea to be against fracking in Pennsylvania. Also, the breakout of riots now in Philadelphia. That's just reminding the voters more generally. Now, here's the bad news for Trump. While I think the polls are tightening and he's had a pretty good closing argument, not a bad second debate, a terrible first debate, but not a bad second debate, and some shy voter, which we'll talk about in a minute, the problem for President Trump is 90 million votes have already been cast. So even if Trump is winning the closing argument, the early kind of momentum indicators, a lot of votes were cast before Trump had a good week, if you stipulate to that. And so the president might still lose, but I think he's closing strong. And I think the polls are going to be proved wrong. The last point I'll make, maybe I'll just hint at, because I've been speaking for a while, and I'll just put on the table if you want to pick up afterward. But Matt, you already addressed it a little bit. There are two interesting issues post-election. One is the Electoral College, where the state legislatures have the ability to affect who represents the state electors at the Electoral College. Then you get into the question of, do the governors have a veto of that? Not all of this has been litigated in the past. There was some litigation after the Rutherford B. Hayes election of 1876. There was a law in 1887. It's never been fully adjudicated in the Supreme Court. I won't get more wonky than that, but there will be a lot of controversy about the Electoral College. The other point I just want to plant the seed is the House. If there is no 270 vote winner out of the Electoral College, under the 12th Amendment, it's the House of Representatives that decides the election. But which House of Representatives? Likely the new House of Representatives, not the current House of Representatives. But there will be controversy about that, because will it be one vote per state delegation? So all of California's 53 members of Congress, 45 or 6 of whom are Democrat, 7 or 8 of whom are Republican, that's one vote, California. It'll clearly be for the Democrat. But if you add up all the states, it's not clear until after the election if there are 26 states whose majorities of their state congressional delegations are still Republican or might swing Democrat. So even the 12th Amendment, House voting, if there's not 270 from the Electoral College, is still in dispute. So we'll get to our bottom lines at the end, Nolan, I know, but I'm planting seeds that this is going to be a little messier than the media had many people thinking going into this weekend and on Tuesday.
All right. Well, that's our show. Thank you for Thank you, Larry. That was terrific. Excellent
Larry,
stuff. And a lot there
I
to
don't know
unpack.
where
Go ahead,
you-
Arthur.
I don't know where you're getting a 52% approval rating.
Rasmussen probably.
I have yet to see a number over 42.
No, Rasmussen has
Ever.
it at 52.
Rasmussen did have him at 52.
No. Rasmussen is they get like a D minus for polling. I don't know how they do it, but
That's not really fair comment. Hold on. Without being partisan, Rasmussen was better than almost every other poll in the country in 2016. So they don't get a D minus. They get an A.
No, hang on. Matt covered this and he covered it very carefully. The polls weren't wrong. The low probability event occurred. Rasmussen didn't have that probability as low as the other people did, but they still had it low. Anybody who's spent any time at a racetrack, 3-to-1 shots come in all the time, about 1 out of 3. So,
Well, that leads to Nolan's big next question. Are the polls correctly measured?
Let me run with something here. I'm going to go to Vin, and then we're going to go back to Matt because I know Matt wants to say something. But Vin, you've actually sat in these. You talked earlier. You've actually been in the war room, so to speak, at USA Today, and I know you've worked with networks and actually had to make the calls in certain states. You've got some experience weighing evidence here. You've heard what Arthur said. You've heard what Larry said. Talk about the polls and jump in here.
Yeah, I do want to just make a general statement about this, which is that, in constructing these polls and measuring these polls, I can honestly say we don't care. We don't care who's going to win, and we don't care who's going to lose. That is not our goal in constructing these polls. And in fact, the polls are mostly useful retrospectively. The idea of using polls to prognosticate on who's going to win and as an accurate measuring tool of what's going to happen in the future is a relatively new phenomenon, and in my mind, a pretty ridiculous thing to do. Is polls capture a snapshot in time. They don't capture a future event. They capture what people are thinking at the moment. And people start to extrapolate from that based off of that. But when we construct the polls, we're trying to get equal number of voters. We're trying to, whether it's likely voters or, registered voters or however you want to construct, what you are trying to do from a very academic and scientific way is get a snapshot of the electorate that is fair and that is balanced. That's going to represent what the actual electorate is going to look like. In 2016, the polls missed. And there is no denying the fact that the polls missed in 2016, and they missed for a variety of reasons. But one of the reasons they missed is they got the electorate wrong. And when you get the electorate wrong, you're going to see outlying results. The other thing to remember, as Arthur said, is that low probability events happen. If you take a look at 2016, one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton lost is she vastly underperformed among African Americans and Latinos, and in key swing states. And had she performed, up to what the poll models thought they were going to do, the result would have been different. And so, yes, polls can be wrong. There's without a doubt, but the polls aren't constructed with the idea of saying we're going to favor one party or the other. If a mistake is made for honest reasons. It's not made because they want one person to win versus the other. These are people who take their science seriously. They approach it from a fact-based point of view, and they try to get things right because no one likes to get things wrong. And in particular, no one likes to be wrong the way they were in 2016 with egg all over their face. It's a matter of professional pride.
Well, nobody quotes Zogby anymore. Let's leave that out there. Matt, I know you've been wanting to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may. With regard to what Vin just said and what Larry said earlier about the African American vote, which is 100% true. That's why Biden was chosen by the Democratic National Committee. Let's be fair. He wasn't chosen by the people. The people didn't make him their candidate. The Democratic National Committee made Biden the candidate. Why? Because, as Vin said, Hillary Clinton underperformed among African Americans. As Larry said, it's still a major concern for the Biden camp that they might not get the African American vote out. But he was, let's just be frank, he was the white man that was the right-hand man for the first Black president. And now he's got a Black vice presidential nominee. We don't know how much weight that really has. We won't know until election day because polls are, like you pointed out, just an estimate. But that's pretty much dictated to me their entire strategy leading up to this point, is that the African American vote underperformed and that they see that as their path to victory. Whether it succeeds or not, we'll have to wait and see. The other thing I was going to say with response to Arthur, and something that, Nolan, I know you did this kind of tongue in cheek in the past, like sort of making fun of the undecided voter, where it's like, how the fuck can you be undecided at this point, right? I mean, it's very clear lines drawn. I would disagree. I would say there are two very specific camps of undecided voters that maybe, are not immediately obvious. And the first is like the most left-leaning liberals, where if you just really were in the Sanders camp or even, further to the left of that, I mean, we know how large a chunk of people voted third party in 2016 and voted for Jill Stein. And we're hoping there's not a repeat of that. You want to think that they learned their lesson from that, but there's still some people that are still fed up with the two-party system, who still, Biden does not satisfy enough of what they're looking for in a candidate, and they're going to vote third party, as ridiculous as that may seem to any of us. And again, how many of those people are there? We don't know exactly, but enough that it could swing an election, because it has twice, right? I mean, in 2000, Ralph Nader siphoned enough votes in Florida, and 2016, Jill Stein siphoned enough votes in Michigan. So we know these things are possible. Who are the other undecided voters? Well, let's say you're a, conservative that is a centrist conservative, right? Where you voted Republican your whole life and you really are pretty dead set on voting Republican, but Trump is continuing to turn you off. Like, he's just doing thing after thing that just you're having more and more trouble stomaching. I mean, that's a legitimate undecided voter, where they're like, I really support all of the Republican ideals, but I'm really having trouble getting behind this individual. And like for different people, there's a different tipping point, and it's hard to, pinpoint exactly what that is. And to know, you would have to do polls basically every day, to know like what was the thing that finally, drove you away from Trump, if there was one. But obviously we can't take polls every single day, and even when we do, they're inaccurate. But that's the undecided voter. Is there somebody that's like, you know what, I'm a centrist, maybe I'm finally realizing that Biden is somebody that I could work with his policies, because Trump is just not, I just can't justify it anymore. But yeah, as Larry pointed out, I think a vast majority of the people that don't want to admit in the polls who they're voting for are probably leaning Trump. And so that, that's the undecided. They do exist. They're out there.
I mean, Matt, I would agree with that. That's a good encapsulation of who the undecideds are. I think the big difference between 2016 and 2020 is the sheer volume of undecideds is significantly lower.
I hope so. I mean, right, exactly. In 2016, there was a much greater sense that like you were picking the lesser of two evils, right, among the population. It was like, it was very easy to dismiss both of them and just say, oh, Hillary's too problematic, Trump's too problematic, fuck them both, And I do get less sense of that this year, but again, that's just a personal feeling. I'm not a pollster. I'm not somebody that really has his pulse, his finger on the pulse of what's happening. I'd like to think you're correct. I hope you are.
Excuse me. Interestingly, back in the early 1960s, I was part of a polling team. That's how old I am. I was a grad student working on my doctorate, and a friend of mine who was in the political science department and I got together with one of the professors in poli-sci, and we started a little polling company. We never made any money. We didn't try to make any money. We were just trying to see if we could get a sense of what was going on in local politics. Now, this was in Providence, in Rhode Island. I was at Brown University. And we went to the Democratic candidate for the mayor of Providence and said, would you like us to do a poll for you? And he said, yeah, do what the hell you want. Well, don't fucking bother me. So we said, okay. And we did it. And, we knew our math, we knew our stats, we knew how to do this thing. And we had a much bigger sample than we really needed. It was like killing a mosquito with a sledgehammer. Vin understands, how to play the numbers game here. But what we did was to match our sample to the census so that we had the right proportion of people of Hispanic background, which, by the way, there's significant numbers of them in the Providence area because of a large Portuguese population. We had education balances, we had socioeconomic status balances, and we took the poll and we went to his name was Glogly. We went to him and said, sir, you're going to lose by about 6 points. And he threw us out. He said, get the fuck out of my office. He said, Democrats don't lose in Providence. Well, he lost by 6 points. And boy, do we have business after that. I mean, we wrote up our report and handed it around to all of the political types in the state of Rhode Island. And I said, that's it, I got to get back to my dissertation. So I bailed out of it and another graduate student took over. But it was really interesting. And part of what we discovered, and this is a fundamental aspect of polling, is that different people have different reasons for voting in a way that's the same. And sometimes they will get shifts, not because of any particular, increase or decrease in their, positive or negative sentiments for a candidate, but because something in the larger culture of society has changed, and some issue has become more significant, and they see that as important, while other people don't see it as particularly important. So, for example, things like the white supremacists that seem to be tailing along behind in Trump's wake. This is really pissing off people who might normally be Trump supporters. And they just cannot stand the fact that he will not outwardly condemn these people and pull away. But other people don't mind. It doesn't bother them as much. They like Trump. They like him for who he is. And they're perfectly willing to live with this component to it. So when you see these kinds of shifts in the polling, and ultimately I think that Larry's right, the way in which they actually, sit down, fill in the bubble or press the lever, it will likely have a lot to do with the way in which they interpreting these different factors. And you won't know that.
Arthur, I'm really glad you told that's some of the stories there about the Rhode Island thing, and there are just things that you can foresee, and then there's certainly things you can't foresee. I'm going to give you a bit of a story here, a very short story, and then I'd like you all four of you, to apply it to this year's election, and that's the Dewey factor. And what I mean there is, if you recall the 48 election with Dewey and Truman, everyone thought that Dewey would beat Truman in 48. Now, why am I going back 70 years? What's the point here? Well, all the predictors, all the models there, even back 70 years ago in the 48 election, had Truman, who was wildly unpopular at the time, even though history has judged him very favorably. At the time in 48, no one thought he was going to win re-election. And somebody named Jimmy the Greek from Steubenville, Ohio, was he's very young at the time, but he was an odds maker and coming up and coming. And he went around and he found out that women didn't like or didn't trust men with pencil thin mustaches. I'm not making this up, by the way. It's a famous, right. If you're familiar with political history, it's actually a true story that the deciding, and he was right. Jimmy the Greek was correct that the women vote. Now I know this is extremely superficial, that somebody would vote based on someone's appearance, but hey, when you're talking about a very close election, 2 or 3 or 4 points swinging one direction can determine the outcome of an election. And that's exactly what happened in 1948, where Jimmy the Greek forecasted, had talked to every woman that he talked to, seemed to not like the way Thomas Dewey looked. And so they voted for Truman. And then Truman, of course, just got the Chicago Tribune the next morning. Dewey, everyone knows the famous photograph. Here's what I'm asking now: is what is that mustache moment that Dewey defeats Truman? Is that what we may be seeing here in 2020 with Trump upsets, shows that the pollsters again are wrong because of two things. Obviously, what Larry called the shy Trump voter, the person who's lying to the pollsters or simply not telling the truth. And of course, Larry won't like this as a Republican, but voter suppression being absolutely effective, and certainly effective enough in key states to not quite tabulate maybe as many Democratic votes as he might have gotten. I'm talking about Biden would have gotten otherwise. Larry Greenfield, you begin.
So I love that question, and it actually allows me to do just a point or two of cleanup on some of the previous comments. But I'll answer it in the rubric.
Very artful, Mr. Greenfield, very artful.
Thank you. JFK definitely won the debate for those who watched on TV. Very glamorous, charismatic, and confident presentation. And Nixon, many people felt, was very substantive, but he'd hurt his knee and he had 5 o'clock shadow and he was sweating and he lost on TV but won on radio. So imagery and energy. So this is point number one for me. I don't think the Biden strategy of being in the basement for the month has been very effective. Trump is out there working his butt off, like him or hate him. And I think there may be a charisma factor here, an energy factor, a I want it more, I'm asking for your vote more factor. Point number two, Matt said something that I thought was super interesting, and I'm going to be fair and balanced here. It's true that Biden had a strategy to win the Democratic primary by winning South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Remember, he barely registered in the other earlier states. I think Iowa, Nevada, and maybe one other one. And then in South Carolina, with the help of Congressman Clyburn, I believe, Biden did very well. So on the theory that Matt offered, Biden, and then Biden picking Kamala Harris from California, an African-American woman, made sense to attract the Black vote. But I don't think it was a good pick, because Biden has a very mixed history in the Black community. They don't like him for the reasons Kamala Harris attacked him in that debate, if you remember. He had been friends with Southern racist senators. His 1994 crime bill was unpopular. He called Black super predators, or he didn't, but the rumors are that he did. He said, you ain't Black if you don't vote Democrat. He said to a radio interviewer, what are you, high or something? Or are you on crack, when he disagreed with him? Biden is a little dicey on the Black vote. So I'm not sure it was the perfect pick. Next, new registrants have come in, new registered voters, and they lean a little GOP. So that adds to my conversation about momentum and which way the American people are kind of figuring their way through the closing arguments. Next, Arthur mentioned white supremacists. Well, you know, that only opens the door for me to mention Antifa and BLM. And I promise you, subjective comment, there are a lot more people in this country upset about riots and murders in Chicago and doxing and intimidation and urban unrest and insurrection and violence than there are people worried that Mr. Trump, who has Jewish grandchildren, and by the way, if you Google it, 25 times has condemned David Duke, who actually endorsed Biden, and condemned white supremacists. So I think the Antifa BLM factor is way bigger than the white supremacy factor. And finally, Nolan, directly to your question, I think there's a whole lot of Americans who are upset with the media and its coverage or lack of coverage of, and you can disagree with me completely, I understand, the revelations in the last few weeks about potential Biden family corruption. Now, you can say, where are the sources for that? But the fact that we haven't even had the media having conversations about it, I mean, the New York Post is the oldest newspaper in America. It's not exactly a right-wing rag. It's definitely leaning conservative editorially. But I think a lot of people are upset with the media coverage of this campaign and election.
Excuse me, Larry. I just
It
have
is
to
another
interrupt
way to
you for
put a
moment.
finger at
I'm sorry, Larry. I have to interrupt you for a moment. The Wall Street Journal turned that story down.
So did Fox
They did
News.
not. If you've read the Wall Street Journal for the last 2 weeks and you watch Fox News for the last 2 weeks, a ton of coverage about the revelations in the New York Post story. So they didn't turn it down, they're amplifying it. There's meat there. You may not like it, it may not be relevant to your vote.
Wait a minute, Larry. I'm just going to push back on just a second on the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
I'm not going to touch Fox. Wall Street Journal has two camps. You've got the opinion page, and you've got the news section. The news section's come out and thoroughly debunked it. The opinion page has run with it. And there's a distinct difference when you're talking about the coverage. The opinion writers said they're running it. They're off to the races and they're all over it. But the news section, and there's a civil war going on in the Wall Street Journal right now in the newsroom, because the newsroom and the opinion page, the editorial room, are unhappy with each other. The opinion room says, wait a minute, you should be on this, you should be covering it, we got this right. And the newsroom saying, yeah, we don't see it, so we're not reporting it. And so there is, even within the Wall Street Journal, there are two distinctly different camps. You have the newsroom, which is saying, nope, we don't see any smoke there, we don't see any fire there. And then you've got the opinion page in the column and saying, yeah, there's definitely smoke and fire. So it's not a fair characterization to say you want to know what the Wall Street Journal's got this and they're running with it. You're seeing in the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, but you're not seeing it on 1A, you're not seeing it in the news section. And there's a difference.
Okay, that's fair comment by you. But I think in recent days, with the longtime Democrat, Mr. Bobulinski, coming out with full revelations that he did have a meeting with Hunter and with the vice president. And the vice president is the big guy. And they did raise a ton of money together in China. And Hunter Biden did go on a plane ride on Air Force Two with the vice president, his father, to China. And where did Hunter Biden get all these contracts with foreign governments? There's clearly a story here that at some level is worth looking at. And it's clearly not made up by the Russians, which was the immediate knee-jerk reaction of the media. I actually believe that the media did block and black out this story in a pretty hard way. So I don't think it got through to the average voter. But I do think there's meat to this story.
Excuse me, Larry, I'm going to stop you for a minute. I don't mean to be rude.
Okay.
I'm going to, first of all, welcome Dr. David Croson from Michigan State University, by the way. So welcome, David, when he comes on. By the way, and I just want to say to you,
Go green.
I do want to say that regardless of this story, whether it has any legitimacy or not, here's the issue. Is it going to impact the election, rightly or wrongly, whatever you want to say about it? It's not going to impact the election. Nobody who's a factory worker in Ohio cares a damn about Hunter Biden's finances 4 years ago. Nobody cares about this. It's not going to impact the election. So let me just give you one last shot to explain whether you think it's got a legal case or not. Why is anybody, just from a purely political strategy standpoint, this is a horrible final push message. Hunter Biden, seriously? If I was advising the Trump campaign, I would say talk about jobs, whatever you want to credit you want to take for the economy, a lot of different things that they can push. You know, obviously I don't agree with, but at least that had something they can latch onto. Do you think any factory worker or suburban housewife in Milwaukee cares about Hunter Biden? Last word to you, Larry, then we'll welcome in David.
I welcome that question. The answer is you're right, except that I'm also right. The president agrees with you too. His closing argument is not about Hunter Biden. It's about a lot of other things. But the media and its coverage of the riots and its coverage of the insurrection and the violence and its coverage of Biden hiding in his basement and its lack of questions of Joe Biden and its apparent bias and unfairness. If you watch nightly CNN, NBC, etc., you do not see reasonable, fair and balanced media. And that irritates the voter in Ohio. It isn't about Hunter Biden being corrupt and a drug addict, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're right about that, Nolan. It's about that people don't feel that the media is fair in this country. That's what's going on.
Fair enough. Good closing statement. As soon as we can get David's audio and video, I don't know if he can hear us, but it's nice to have him with us. and let's just continue the discussion. And again, I'll let David here have a word when he comes in. Here's what we're going to do, gentlemen, because we could just go round and round on this. I think this has been a great discussion, but now we're going to narrow it. We're going to laser focus this a bit more because we have a lot of topics to discuss in a relatively short amount of time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually have a timeout. You've got 30 seconds, each of you, to answer these topics. So it's going to be what I call a lightning round. We've got a lot of different things to go over, including Senate races. We're going to discuss several topics, but you have 30 seconds. We're going to start basically go around. We're going to start with Matt Lessinger and wind around. So if is everybody ready to go? Thumbs up, ready to go. Lightning round, here we go. All right, first question. David, are you there with us? Oh, let's get David in first to make sure he's on board with us. David?
Got his card holder.
What is that, the object that is there? There we
There
go.
he is.
David, can you hear us and see us? I think he's on vacation. All right. We know California is going to probably go blue. I think we've made that point.
Never say go blue to a Michigan State guy.
David Croson, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, I can. Thanks,
All
Nolan.
right. You're coming in late, but you know what? That means you get kind of the last word, the first word. We're going to do a lightning round of questions here that I'm going to ask. Everyone gets 30 seconds to answer, but you're coming in late. I don't know if you heard anything we've said. If not, just give us your kind of overview of where we stand 3 days out, David Croson. And by the way, you have an economics background. That's why you were asked to be here. Real quick, I have to ask one more thing. Put in your answer, and you have more than 30 seconds, of course. Discuss, obviously, the selling point for Trump prior to COVID was the economy. You're able to talk about with some authority here. So put that in your answer too, please. Thank you.
Okay. Well, so, COVID changes a lot of things. This is, become increasingly obvious over the last 6 months or so. I think that there are a lot of people who are massively overconfident in their ability to predict what's going to happen, both in the economy overall and in the election. I saw that 538 had moved to a 90% probability that Joe Biden has enough votes to win the Electoral College. And I think there are a lot of people who are going to go out and say that's the same as a certainty. And I think that is a mortal error. All right. I think that obviously Biden is favored. I think obviously the population numbers and the voting says that Biden is likely to get a majority and possibly a large majority. But, I don't want this to turn into a bridge jumping kind of situation. And I think that it's quite probable that, whoever ends up winning, they're going to win by a lot less than everybody thinks, right? It's going to be a lot closer. I think that, fully 50% of the population has already endowed themselves with the idea that Biden has it in the bag and there couldn't possibly anything that could go wrong. And all of the hurdles have been cleared. And I just don't think that's right. And so, while I would, handicap that as being favorable to Biden at this point, even remarkably favorable to Biden, I don't think it's all the way at 9-1. I wish I were able to see the future and say what it would take in order to bring the economy back. But, every time anybody has come forward with an assumption or an assertion about this, they've, the only question has been, have they been off by 50% or 100% or 1,000%? And so I think, it's really important in order to, play cautiously and limit one's commitment to exposure on either side.
All right, excellent. Ready to play lightning round politics, gentlemen? Here we go. Matt, you're first up. 30 seconds for everybody. First question to the Democrats. Why are you going after Texas? Why are you spending time and money and flying the candidates, meaning Kamala Harris and Joseph Biden? Why are you going after Texas this late in the game when I know it's in play and it's within the margins, but come on, let's be honest here. Shouldn't they be spending time in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania? Are they wasting time in Texas? Matt Lessinger.
Are they wasting time compared to other places they could be? Possibly, but like we've discussed, I mean, they really need to run up the score, right? They need a 2-touchdown victory. So even if they can't win the Electoral College in Texas, if they can bring the popular vote close, I mean, there's such a huge number of people voting in Texas. So if they can narrow that gap, even if they don't win it outright, you come closer to running up the score in the popular vote and making a stronger case for yourself. So no, I don't think they're wasting their time. If they end up losing, that's going to be one of the things that ends up in the replay is the Monday morning quarterbacking, right? Is why did they go to Texas? But at the moment, I wouldn't say it's a waste of time. No.
Arthur.
Same question. I basically think that Matt covered it nicely. If they pull off Texas, it's huge. And again, it's one of these things where, the risk, the cost benefit analysis is maybe a little shaky because it's unlikely that they can do it. But if they do it, then the payoff is enormous. And so that's what I think they're thinking. And by the way, I don't think it's not that they're not going to Wisconsin and Michigan. They are. It's just the surprise is that they've added Texas. And by the way, Larry, I don't think that Biden's in the basement. He was in the basement for about a week or 10 days, and it was a good thing to do. And they were worried about COVID and a variety of other issues. But he was making regular announcements and regular videos, and he's not in the basement.
Okay, he had to get a punch in there. All right, well done. But Larry, by the way, has got the rebound. Arthur, you just woke up the sleeping dog there. Vin, your turn.
Yeah, as far as Texas goes, I think it's actually a smart move. It has nothing to do with winning Texas. It has everything to do with winning the state legislature in Texas, and it has everything to do with the future of Texas politics.
Good point.
Yeah, you don't go to Texas now in an effort to win. The Democrat, I mean, I would be stunned if the Democrats won Texas, and I would be not stunned at the Democrats. Let me take that back. I would be stunned if Biden won Texas. It is curious to me that more people have voted in early voting in Texas than any other state, than any other time in history. So they've had more people vote in early voting than they've ever had to vote in regular voting in Texas right now. So huge population surge. The state of Texas is changing. You have to try and be competitive in Texas. And to me, this is why you do it. This is about the future. It's not necessarily about this race. And there is a shot, it's an outside shot, but there is a shot that the Democrats control the legislature in Texas after the election's all said and done.
Dr. C?
Yep. Well, I think Vin's on the right track with this. They are thinking forward to 2022 and 2024, and they are literally playing with House money, as in House of Representatives money. They think that they've got the national level contest wrapped up, but if they can go and show support, generate voter enthusiasm, and even if they lose Texas just by this much, they're thinking ahead about flipping seats. They would love to get rid of both Cornyn and Cruz, in Texas, and that would be a huge win for them. They're not doing it for the money, but they're doing it to undermine a Republican base that people have counted on for decades at this point, ever since, I guess, LBJ. And they're saying, look, they're thinking that the opportunity cost of them not being in other places is not so high that they can't start sowing some seeds for 2 and 4 years in the future. I would be shocked if they were doing it to raise money. That would be a silly reason to go to Texas. But they're there to demonstrate that Texas is in play. And I think Texas is in play, if not now, in 2 or 4 years.
Larry?
I agree with much of what's been said. I'm not critical of a 50-state strategy for any party. The Democrats have done some things very well. They have far outraised the president in terms of money, including from Nolan's favorite, Wall Street. Wall Street money has come in 100-1 for Biden over Trump. So we know who's the party of the elite rich in Manhattan. I will say this, Arthur, I'll gently suggest that when Biden had lids at 10 a.m. day after day and didn't have press conferences and didn't take questions and wasn't out there in state after state, if Biden were to lose, I think Democrats could rightly say, we did pick the candidate who wasn't that vigorous, who wasn't in many states per day for a month. I just don't think he was a very aggressive campaigner. However, the Democrats did win the media wars with their big money advantage. They've been all over the country with commercials. So if they do win, the Democrats can cite their big money edge and their big commercials edge.
By the way, that is
Nolan, just briefly.
Sure.
One of the reasons why Wall Street is behind Biden is because they see him as consistent, and they see Trump as erratic. And the one thing that the Wall Street brokers and the bankers do not like is an erratic leader. And so they have shifted over. By the way, it's kind of interesting. You know who else is now backing Biden? Putin. Putin's sharp. And he's beginning to see that his boy is liable to lose. In fact, probably will lose. And so he's preparing to deal with Biden. And the way to do that is to make nice and not to back Trump on an issue when he's asked to. And I find this really, really fascinating.
To say he's backing Biden is a little strong, I would say.
It's a little strong, yeah.
He's damning Trump by his face, right?
When he was asked to condemn Biden, he didn't do it.
Right.
Next question, gentlemen. Let's talk about Florida. I know we can't do this in 30 seconds each, but let's try. Anyway, keep them short and brief if you can. This state has always been a clusterfuck. And I have seen reports that this year they've got their shit together when it comes to the counting. These are the reports I'm seeing is they're going to be much more efficient this year. We shouldn't see certainly what Matt and I talked about as far as 2000, what happened with that disaster. Florida has their shit together supposedly, but it's still an extremely complex state with a lot of different influences. Talk about Florida. What do you predict? Where do you think Florida is going to end up? What column on November 3rd? By the way, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Larry, I know you spent a lot of time looking at Florida. Larry Greenfield, why don't you start off? We'll go back the other direction on this one.
Right. I previously mentioned that the Democrats apparently have not rolled up the vote advantage they need early in Miami-Dade, which is a Democratic county. I also mentioned that registration has evened out in the state compared to where it was in 2016. So the Democrats don't start with a big lead or as big a lead in registration. An advantage I thought the Democrats might have had was the Puerto Ricans who moved to Florida after the big hurricane trauma. So that's an issue to watch, the Puerto Rican vote. The Hispanic vote, apparently, the Cuban vote remains strong for the GOP. But I also want to agree with the first thing you said. Florida seems to have cleaned up its act under this governor. They allow early vote counting. Some other states are not even opening up ballots that have already been cast. But Florida is already underway with its vote. So Florida will let us know right away, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, a very early count soon thereafter on election night. So we'll get off to a reasonably good start. We'll have problems later in the evening, but Florida may not be one of them.
Real quick follow-up, Larry, in 15 seconds. If Florida doesn't go Trump's way, is he dead?
Yes. But I predict he'll win Florida and it'll still be a close race. But I do think Trump will win Florida. But if the Republicans don't win Florida, they lose.
David?
Well, I'm not an expert on Florida politics. I've never lived there, right? I know obviously it's a battleground state, newly having been, reliably read before. I'd be skeptical that the Republicans have the lock on Florida this time. I think Florida is more in play than Texas is for a different reason, and it's because of young voters. I think that there are a lot of older voters who voted for Trump the first time and who are likely to stay home. They're not so passionate about Trump that they want to come in and, fire the second barrel. But, I could not, it's hard to imagine people who are between 18 and 21, right? Having just gotten the voting franchise, having not been able to vote the other time, it's hard to imagine that virtually any of them will be voting Republican. And so I would be concerned if I were the GOP, not just at the top of the ticket, but for any down ticket races, that you're just going to get, an extra couple of % of people, of voters that break completely blue. They're just about close to 100% blue, and who have been enabled to show up and vote early and take time out when it's convenient in their schedule to do it. And so I think that we're going to see, I think that we're going to see, dramatic shifts in that area. I don't know how many of them there are, right? I haven't gone and done the math on how many young people there are between 18 and 22. But, I think that that's something which previously Florida has not had a lot of that would really matter. And I think it might be true for the first time in this election. Larry says no.
I've never seen a poll that shows a wildly Democratic tilt for 18 to 22-year-old voters. In fact, I'm hearing the opposite. I'm hearing they don't like the lockdown. They don't like being left out of school and university and jobs, and that it's not true at all that the young vote is a lock for the Democrats. That's not what I'm hearing.
Well, I mean, I can see how they would not like that. I mean, I don't like it either, and I'm way out of that age demographic. But it's not clear that the Democrats are the party of lockdown and not being able to go and have jobs and not being able to go to school. I mean, those lockdowns have happened under the previous administration. And I think although President Trump has done his best to distance himself from that and to say, don't let this ruin your life, he still has that tar all over him.
If you want a 30-second comment, this will be anecdotal, not scientific, but ask moms and dads in blue states who they blame for lockdowns and on jobs, on restaurants, openings and visitation, and on gyms and on school and on university. It's Democratic governors who've been pushing the lockdown for months, not the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
I would agree with that. I lived in Michigan up until last year, and certainly that was the case, right? And a lot of people were really grumbling about that, despite the fact that Gretchen Whitmer was reasonably popular. She certainly wasn't popular for that.
Well said.
All right, let's move on to Florida. We're talking about the Florida race. Obviously, a very important state. Vin, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I agree with Larry to a certain extent in that Biden is vastly underperforming in Miami-Dade. Typically, you would expect a Democratic candidate to try and run up the score in Miami-Dade and in Broward, and then sort of try and hold on for the rest. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I expect the Republicans to win. The path to victory for Biden in Florida is eating into Biden's advantage or to Trump's advantage with senior voters. Senior voters are unhappy with the president, and if he eats into those margins significantly, it might not matter that he's not running up the score in Miami-Dade. I expect the Republicans and I expect President Trump to carry Florida, but it's going to be close, and it's going to be an interesting race. But yeah, I think Trump carries Florida.
Arthur?
Well, I last lived in Florida when I was 2 years old, so my insights into Florida politics is about that of a 2-year-old. But I do think that one thing is hurting Trump in Florida is his negative comments about Social Security, and talking about that and talking about his efforts to repeal Obamacare. And I think that is really hurting him among seniors. And I mean, he keeps saying that he's got this wonderful health care plan that he's going to replace Obamacare with, and it'll be out in 2 weeks. Right? I think the Lincoln Project had an ad on this one in which they repeated Trump saying that the plan will be out in 2 weeks, something like 25 times, all within 45 seconds. I think that's an element. So I'm thinking that Trump does not carry Florida. I think Biden's going to carry it. But that's a 2-year-old guess. 2 years old child's guess. Okay. By the way, Nolan, do you have the pandemic and the response to it as one of the issues? Because this is the overriding issue, and we haven't touched on it yet.
I agree. It's the number one issue in the race.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. We'll after Matt talks about Florida, we'll go around and talk about COVID. I thought that would I didn't want the show to be about COVID because that's such it's such an obvious thing that it would come up in almost every state, every question. But if you care to, we can take a roundtable discussion on that. Matt, after you give us your Florida analysis, please.
Just real quick. I mean, the betting markets have Florida as a 3-2 favorite for Trump. So, I mean, you kind of go based off of that. My only experiential knowledge is one of my best friends lives in the Villages, which is this 100,000 person, mostly senior development in northern Florida that's in the news a lot because of Trump, and Trump just went down there and did a rally. I think there's sort of this image in the media that like the entirety of the Villages is behind Trump. And there was a tremendous amount of backlash to his visit. I mean, that doesn't get coverage because who cares once he leaves town, whatever. But he went to a senior development and held a massive rally with most people not wearing masks. I mean, there's still now, even weeks later, people that are furious that he decided to come. And I don't know that that changes anybody's vote, but the idea that an area like the Villages will entirely support Trump 100%, that's a false narrative. So, but it's anybody's guess how much of their approximately 100,000 person population would actually back Biden. I know my friend and a lot of his neighbors and such are Biden supporters, but I just have these images of Trump going to these areas and holding rallies, and then it's like a given that that entire area supports, and that's not just Florida, that's everywhere that he's campaigned recently. It's like there's just as much backlash right after he leaves that doesn't get coverage, but it's a real thing.
All right. So Arthur, you wanted to bring out COVID. Why don't you go ahead and take it from here and make your case for why? Obviously, this is the issue of our time. Again, why is it an issue on determining the outcome of the election? Go ahead, Art.
Well, my perspective on this is that Trump's handling of it is nothing short of calamitous. It has been the most horrific display of ineptitude and incompetence in my lifetime, and I'm in my 80th year right now. I've never seen anything quite like it. He lied at the beginning. He misrepresented the circumstances. He has not supported or backed any program at all. He keeps talking about what a wonderful job we're doing, and we've got it beaten, and it's come around the corner, and it's almost 100,000, almost 230,000 people have died already, and it's just, I mean, the number of people, it's over 100. Did it hit 100,000 today? Cases that were reported.
Yeah, let me steer you a little bit. Arthur.
Yeah.
Again, impact on the election. There's a lot of people that
impact on the election. I think.
Hear me out. There's a lot of people that don't bring Trump. And
I can tell you.
Go ahead.
It's very simple. You ask people to list the issues that they're concerned the most about. Healthcare comes out number one. That's why it's going to have an impact on the election.
I'll follow up to you then. Let's suppose there was no COVID. Do you think that Trump would have been in a much better position, and perhaps
yes.
would his lead have been insurmountable? Maybe.
Yes, but the economy was good prior to COVID. Now Trump takes a lot of credit for the economy being good, but if you look at the graphs, there's no inflection point. There's no shift upward or downward, depending upon the measure that you're looking at, that follows from Trump's election. So he didn't really do anything. But he didn't do anything bad. So he didn't disrupt the growth that was developed by Obama in his last 5 years. So he didn't hurt it. And so he could claim that things are good, and they are, and unemployment was way down. And yeah, I think that it gave him a real shot at being reelected. I think COVID has hurt him terribly. And I think it's hurt him not only because there's so much sickness and so much death and what it's done to the economy, but by the way he's handled it. There's very, you have to, I mean, Larry will jump in here, I'm sure, but I have yet to hear a single person say that he handled it right. And when he made a comment the other day, which really got to me, he said, if Biden's elected, do you know what he's going to do? He's going to listen to the scientists. And at that point, I just, I put my shoe back down again because I didn't want to throw it through my TV.
All right, Vin.
Yeah, COVID's the number one issue on the ballot. Just look, you've got surges in the Plain States, you have surges in the Midwest. It is demonstrably false that we're rounding the turn or whatever it is. And the voters know and understand that. Whether you choose to ignore it or not is a different question. But COVID is the number one issue on the ballot. What is it? And it's the number one issue on the ballot for three reasons. One is you have the medical impact of the pandemic itself and the health of the country and the health of senior citizens, and just the general health and welfare of the state and of the country. The second reason it's on the ballot is the economy. There's a false choice being peddled between handling the pandemic and the economy. And the two are inextricably linked. And voters understand that. And then the third is the response, which is has generally been with a lack of empathy. Now, empathy is not the president's strong suit, but also, well, it's true. It's not a strong suit.
It's true.
But then the other aspect of the president's response to it has been sort of not being honest with the American people about what's going on. And the president's been forthright about it. He wants to be a cheerleader for it. He wants other people to handle the bad news and that sort of thing. And the American people generally want someone who's going to give it to them straight. And so for people for whom the pandemic is the number one issue, for whom COVID is the number one issue, they are going to have a tough time pulling the lever for President Trump. Absent COVID-19, I think President Trump wins in a landslide. I don't think it's close. But because of COVID-19 and the way he's handled it and the way he's responded to it, that's why Biden's got a shot at winning this. That's why Biden's in the lead. I don't know what's going to happen, but if you want to know why Biden's in the lead, it's COVID and it's the president's response to COVID.
Good points.
David?
Well, I'd be skeptical that there are that many people who changed their mind about how they were going to vote between, say, July and now, right? Things were, get it right. Things were tightened up, right? Cases were down, et cetera. Then things opened back up. And as we know, we're having a really huge surge, which may eclipse the heights that we had before. It's happening worldwide, but it's happening in the US and especially in these Midwestern states, which are battleground states. But, I have not met a single person who said, I was going to vote for Trump before this surge, but now because he's been so ineffective at this, I'm going to change my mind. Right? I mean, I would say it has to do more with turnout than with changing people's choices. I've had the opportunity to drive through Wisconsin a number of times in the past few months in the process of moving from Michigan to Minnesota. I was really shocked to find that Wisconsin was, many, many percentage points in favor of Biden in the ABC poll, which seems to have been conducted in a statistically reasonable way, because everything that I saw in Wisconsin, at least centered around the interstates that I spent most of my time at, said, they hadn't a care in the world, and it seemed to be just the same as it was everywhere else.
I think that ABC poll's a bit of an outlier.
Yeah, well, it's obviously an outlier. The question is, right, is it because of bad methodology, or has there been a sea change in the sentiment for what's going on? A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. I don't think there are a whole lot of people who have switched because of the pandemic. I think that the intensity of people's passion has changed because of the pandemic, and it's made people for Trump a lot more lukewarm about Trump, and it's made people for Biden a lot more, spicy about Trump, to use kind of a more neutral word. But you still only get one vote, right? And it's going to be all about turnout and how many people are going to go and show up.
Yeah.
I really don't know what's going to happen in Wisconsin if a whole lot of people actually have the disease or are worried about the disease on or around Election Day.
Yeah, I think the only part of that where I'd push back on is initially there's this idea that every Trump voter was a gung-ho Trump voter.
No,
and I don't think that was the case at all. And right. I think that the president's response to COVID gave those lukewarm Trump voters, it cemented their decision and said, you want to know what, I'm going the other way. Mm-hmm. And absent that, they might have stuck with the president.
Or at least stay home.
Right? At least stayed home, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so there was something else that I was going to say, but maybe I can come back to it in a minute.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that the question is really going to be, saying for people who have not already committed themselves by sending in their ballot, has anything in the past, month or two really mattered? Right? I can't imagine there are a whole lot of people who are saying, I really want to preserve the option value of voting on Election Day because I don't want to mark my paper and commit myself because I might make a mistake, right? That's a financially very smart thing to do. You don't want to exercise your option until it, is expiring. But, I can't imagine there are a whole lot of people who have really been on the fence as far as that goes. And so, I'm not sure all of these terrible things which are happening, which would, make us believe that if everybody were still forming their opinions now and they weren't going to vote until Tuesday, would have us say Biden in a landslide, are necessarily going to be reflected in the vote counts, because a lot of those votes were printed, they were basically done, as we've seen in Texas a week ago, 2 weeks ago, things like that. And so none of Trump's gaffes in the last 10 days will really matter to those people at all. And so we may be overcounting it because we're media consumers, but those people have already been taken out of the race. Their ballots are set one way or the other, and they can't change them.
All right, Larry.
So I agree with everybody on the first point that the economy was strong before COVID and the president was in pretty good shape politically. A slight kind disagreement with Arthur that the president had no economic policy that had any impact. He did, of course, cut taxes, the largest in history, and deregulation and revival of manufacturing. And by the way, this could be criticized in history, military and other spending, which put us deeper into debt, but probably helped the economy in the short term. I also think it helped our national security. But so we agree that the economy was strong heading into 2020. And I think the president gets credit for that. I think he still gets some credit for that, by the way, including the economic rebound we're experiencing now. On the question of COVID, I also agree that it's impacted his popularity. Unfortunately, COVID is as partisan and disrupting in American politics as everything else has proved to be. There are a lot of people upset with the lockdowns. There are a lot of people skeptical of the scientists who've gone back and forth on masks and on lockdowns. Obviously, social distancing and staying at home works. You don't catch it if you're not near somebody. But for how long can you keep an economy locked down? I think there's a lot of resistance or lack of clarity to what the alternative policy would be. Biden didn't come out with a very clear alternative to the Trump plan on COVID. I watched day after day the Mike Pence, Donald Trump, Anthony Fauci, the general, and all these other experts hold their daily news conference. On the West Coast, it was usually around 2 o'clock every day. And they did do a lot on ventilators and PPE and spending plans and racing to get a vaccine. So at one level, I was feeling the president was being competent and in charge of the crisis. At another level, I agree that the numbers are getting very large, but I appreciated the previous comment, I think by David. Europe is having a terrible problem with the virus. And now we're in the flu season, so we're not sure whether they're counting flu or COVID. So I don't think it's fair to blame Trump, but because the COVID is so big in our lives and meant such a big economic hit, that I think it's been a struggle for the president to get ahead of it. I think history will not judge him that harshly on handling COVID. Remember, it was Biden and the Democrats who said it's okay to go to Chinatown. Pelosi went to Chinatown, and Fauci was all over the place on masks. By the way, it's not clear masks. Some masks work. Obviously, the medical N95 masks work better than the cloth masks. The pores in the masks are too big and they let the virus in. Also, the masks don't cover your eyes. There's also confusion and debate about hydroxychloroquine. And was it crazy to say that it might work? Apparently, some scientists say if given very early in combination with zinc, it may have some effect, but maybe not later. I think there's so much debate about the virus and it was so novel. Last comment. I don't think the president was wrong to blame China politically. I think that's actually a winning issue. And to the Democrats' credit, they did not over politicize the president blaming China for lying and for releasing and for not cooperating. So on that one piece of the virus, I think the president actually had broad support, which is pointing to China that we think was the cause and even the manufacturer of the virus.
All right, I'll just add one thing to that, and that's that on the COVID issue, I think the history will be very damning to this president when we consider the Woodward exchanges that are on tape, his minimalizing and pretty much lying to the American public repeatedly, his own words saying it will go away in a week, people get better by Easter, by the warmer weather, by the summer, over and over and over. Had Donald Trump stepped in front of the microphone in those daily press conferences that all of us watched, that millions of Americans watched, and said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm the president. This is my task force. Let me introduce the scientists and let them talk. That would have been an extraordinary amount of leadership shown in the face of a crisis. What did we get? We got Mr. Clorox and a clown show every single day. Every single time he stepped in front of a microphone, it was about Donald Trump. It was not about the virus. It was not about protecting the American population. And anyone who watched that, who was objective, knows that. It was a catastrophe of leadership. And that's the only editorial I have to say there.
You have 4% of the world's population and 30% of the deaths.
And I'll just add one thing, and this is a communications problem for the president, is that when he talks about COVID, he makes it about himself. And that's a problem for the American people because it's not about the president. It's about the lives of people. And when I said that lack of empathy, it comes across. And until he figures out how to relate with that to the American people, he is not going to win on the COVID issue. Even if you want to say that he's got a lot of good points to make, he has to be able to make it about the American people and the people who are sick and the people who are dying. And it always ends up being about himself. And in the end, that is going to kill him.
You know, I think that's a really good way to end this part of the discussion.
Can I stick in? Can I stick in?
Psychoanalyze Trump. Go ahead, David.
I think that though people are taking the Democratic leadership's silence about what's going to happen in the future of the economy as a practical guarantee that there are going to be restrictions and possibly another round of lockdowns. I mean, Boris Johnson announced that in the UK today. He also had a personal case of COVID. He nearly died, right? And he said, look, we need to lock down for 4 weeks. They're not coming back out of the cocoon until the beginning of December. I would not be at all surprised if no matter who ends up winning, that's something that needs to be done in the United States. But President Trump is saying, look, I'm not going to demand that, right? I am not that guy who's going to tell you have to do that. Whereas I think, former Vice President Biden and Senator Harris are dancing around the issue and not saying we are not those people. And I think that if people are scared of lockdowns more than they're scared of the virus, right, that may be keeping some people who in their hearts would love to see a Democratic administration a little wary of handing over the power.
I just want to cede the point to Nolan. I think you were very eloquent, Nolan. I think the subject of compassion and leadership and honesty does really matter. And I think you drove that home really well. The problem is, I don't think the public feels that Pelosi or Governor Cuomo or Mayor de Blasio and the nursing home debacle in New York was handled well either. And I think Biden missed a chance to show some real differentiation with the president on science and a plan. I never got a plan from the Democrats. What I did hear was mostly what Trump was doing, spending and ventilators and PPE. And so I think you're right. The president's historical record on the way he communicated was bad. I just don't think Biden took advantage of it.
Well said. Thank you, Larry. That's why you're here, to offer a different perspective. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And gentlemen, we're going to go into overtime. Anybody object to some overtime play here? All right. So here, you object to,
yeah.
You got time with us?
It's dinner time over here.
So are you out?
I'm not objecting. I'm saying go for it.
Who wants to go another 15, 20 minutes? Arthur, are you still?
All right. Yeah, you can go. I'm going to refill this. I'll be right back.
In fact, here's what we'll do. I'll tell you what, gentlemen, I'm going to go away for a second here myself, and we're going to come back, and you can talk amongst yourselves, but we're going to give the audience and everybody a break. I'm going to take a break myself. We'll come back in 1 minute. We'll resume. By the way, if you're watching still with us, and we've got a lot to cover, we're going to talk about Senate races. Can Lindsey Graham be defeated in South Carolina? Let's talk about Arizona. Let's talk about Nevada. Let's talk about a lot of different stuff. And then we're going to end up with our predictions, prognostications for everything. Okay. So we're going to go another 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes, probably at the very most. I'll see you back here in 1 minute.
Why don't we throw it to Matt? Matt, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are we achieving your goal for this conversation of an intelligent conversation that's analyzing the election well? Are we missing anything?
No, I think, thank you for the question. No, this is what I had in mind, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your inclusion in it as well. I really hope you don't get the sense that it's 4-on-1 or 5-on-1 or anything at any point. Like, I hope this is a good back and forth. And
Larry can take us on.
oh, fair enough.
I'm used to it anyways.
Yeah, I know. We've argued for years, and he always comes out.
Well, then, having said
right a
that,
few times, Larry.
having said that, can I push back on one thing? Because I never spoke on the COVID thing.
That's
So,
what I'm writing. Yes.
thank you. There's tons of false narratives that Trump puts out there, and it's not worth going over every one. One of the false narratives that really touches a nerve with me is that there was ever a flip-flopping about the wearing of masks. The idea behind the mask wearing was that at the beginning, everybody was supposed to stay home, and the masks were supposed to go to the frontline workers and the people in the hospitals and the doctors and the people that needed them the most. It is not a situation that Fauci or anybody ever said, don't wear a mask. They just didn't want people hoarding masks and keeping them from the people that really needed them. Now, here's the thing. It's not just that Trump was demonstrated to have lied on the Woodward tapes. He's continuing to lie because just by pushing that, saying, oh, well, he told us not to wear masks, now he's telling us to wear masks. He knows that he's pushing a false narrative with that, because he knows that mask wearing was always supposed to be, he knew that it was transmitted, through the mouth and the nose, right? So he knew that from day one. And the idea, and the doctors knew that, obviously, before he knew that. So that's always touched a nerve with me, that he's sort of playing dumb and letting his supporters think that doctors have flip-flopped on that issue. They haven't. Mask wearing was always supposed to be part of what we did once we came out of lockdown. And it worked for what it's worth. Like the masks made it to where they needed to go before people started buying them up for themselves. Yeah. So the idea behind that was successful. Just Trump is trying to manipulate that a little bit for a political gain. And
yeah, and
anyway.
Matt, I just want to build on what you just said, because one of the things that bothers me about all of this discussion is the idea that we can't change our minds based on how the science evolves. And as we get more facts and as we get more information. And so the idea that, well, the scientists said this and now they're saying this and we don't know what to believe. Well, no, I mean, and this isn't just about science. It's about a lot of things in life. About you get more facts, you make an informed decision based as those facts come in. The idea that you want to know what, as the science evolved, for example, in hydroxychloroquine, at one point there was some promise to it, right? It wasn't FDA approved, it wasn't that, but there was some thought that it might work. And then later on, it was shown that it's not nearly as promising as people thought it was going to be. And so to me, it's okay for that to evolve. And it's okay for thinking to evolve as the science changes and as the facts change. And especially in something like COVID, where we still don't know a lot about it. And we're still going to learn as the facts come in. And I think it's really incumbent on all of us as thinking people to say, you want to know what, it's okay for us to change what we thought because we have a new set of facts. And the fact that we would politicize the changing of minds based on a new set of facts, I find really troublesome.
All fair. I just wanted to throw it to David for a second. Nolan, I'm auditioning to be a moderator, so I'm throwing it to David for a second.
You got the job. It doesn't pay shit.
And
you got to work with Matt too.
I love Matt. So David, do you think that there was another shift, which was let's flatten the curve and allow the healthcare system to catch up?
Yes.
So everybody, please, please, please be careful. This is very urgent. We don't want to rush into the hospitals in large numbers. And now, while we want to be super compassionate and careful about everybody, particularly elderly people, because young people really don't die in any significant numbers from this virus. Now it's all about, we don't want to get sick at all, or we don't want the teacher to get sick, or we don't want anyone to get sick. That's not what I remember the scientists and the energy in our community, our country being. It was all about flattening the curve.
I am 100% behind you. The objective changed in the middle. And so that's not just moving the goalposts, it's rotating the field 90 degrees and playing soccer instead of football. right? Previously, they said, we want to flatten the curve. We know that there are going to be infections. That's out of our hands. We know that there are going to be fatalities. That's out of our hands. Let's not make it worse than it's going to be by overwhelming the healthcare system, because it doesn't make any difference how much technology we have if we can't provide basic comforts to people, right, in a hospital because we're out of beds. And I mean, I think at that curve, we managed to duck under hitting a true crisis on that. We did not have to triage a lot of people. We did not have to send a lot of people to hospice, et cetera. Not yet. And I'm really crossing my fingers that we don't get to that point with this second wave. And then everybody said, hey, forget about that. I want to avoid not just, contracting the virus. I want to avoid being exposed to the virus at all. And people upped their expectations about what should be done with that. And I don't know who to blame or who to credit with that, but there was a complete change in people's objective, as opposed to saying, get through it alive, to say, get through it without actually experiencing the disease. And so I agree that changed a lot. And I can't pinpoint exactly where it changed, but I've observed this myself. And it's kind of odd to, have anybody believe that it's the same objectives that we had prior to, the shutdown and prior to the opening up as we have now. I don't necessarily think it's possible for any individual to do much to avoid getting the virus now, which is different from what they did to avoid getting the virus back in April. I mean, you should wash your hands and you should stay away from sick people, right? And, wearing the mask was never meant as an individually protective device unless you had a full surgical, N95 mask anyway, right? It's now moved to saying, be responsible and don't potentially affect other people if you are infected but asymptomatic. And so there's been a very big,
very simple.
That's not necessarily a bad idea. I'm just saying it's a totally different healthcare strategy, public health
David,
strategy.
there was a very simple natural experiment that just took place in Kansas, and it's absolutely compelling. They put a mask mandate out, but they set it out so that it was a county by county decision. So some county executives said everybody's going to wear a mask, and others said, no, you don't have to. It's up to you.
We can do a regression discontinuity and actually tell whether it works.
And they did. And the infection rate is less than 1/2 in the counties where the mask mandate wasn't.
I'm glad to hear that. I support masks. The cost of wearing a mask is relatively low anyway. And, it does something. We don't know how big the effect is. But, my point is saying we changed the reason why people were wearing masks. Previously, you said you want to wear a mask because you're afraid that you're going to get the virus.
No. That was not.
Then we moved to saying.
Sorry, I'm the scientist here. I'm the guy. I'm a fellow with AAAS. I read science every week. I know the data. I look at these things. Never. No. Everyone knew what masks were. They keep you from spreading it. They do not protect you. But because you have asymptomatic people that don't realize that they've got it, you have to have the mask mandate. And what it does is it keeps you from spreading it. And that's why you get less than half of the infections. And of course, you get less than half of the deaths. And you get less than half of the disruption of the economy. The crazy thing about the position that's being taken by the administration is they seem to think that you just open up the economy. But when you do, you get what they're getting in the Dakotas now, where the infection rate is breathtaking. It's over 130 per 100,000 population, where the nation as a whole is 16. So it's like 8 times. And the economy is getting tanked because people are sick. They're in the hospitals are being overwhelmed. The healthcare professionals are being stressed out. The pressure that's being placed on it is terrible. But if you just take some simple, straightforward measures, right? Wash your hands, wear a mask, socially distance yourself, try not to get into don't go to rallies where everybody's shoulder to shoulder with each other. Then you're gonna get it down. Don't hold motorcycle rally in Sturgis, where 250,000 people come in and then spread it all the way around the country. There's a reason why it's spiking in the upper Midwest. And there's a reason why the previous spike before this one was in the South. And the reason that the first spike was in California, Washington, and New York is perfectly obvious. When Trump first called back everybody, he said, that's it, we're closing the borders. And everybody had 48 hours to get the hell back to the United States. And so tens of thousands of people came back and they all flew into JFK and they weren't prepared to handle them. They were all massed together and they spread it throughout the city. And that's why New York got hammered. And they didn't handle it very well because they didn't know how to do it. Because it was the first time this has happened. It's the first time this kind of a pandemic had showed up. They did the best they could. And they didn't realize, by the way, the same thing that happened in Washington State. They didn't realize how much jeopardy the elderly were in. And so it went right through the old age homes, the retirement homes. Same thing happened in Washington State, which is where I am, where the overwhelming death rate took place in the elderly. But now, as the pandemic has continued and as the population is being infected in a much broader way, guess what's popping up? 30 to 40-year-olds. The death rate is going up there, and it's going up in ways that are making people very unhappy. The other thing to keep in mind is that even if you recover from this, it causes all sorts of extensive damage throughout the organ system. It damages the heart, it damages the liver, it damages the gastrointestinal system. And people are going to have pre-existing conditions that in years to come, we don't know exactly how it's going to pan out. But the best guess among epidemiologists is it's not going to be good. These are people whose lives are almost certainly going to be shortened, and they're almost certainly going to develop other problems and difficulties in the years ahead. All right, I'm done now. Another sip of wine.
All right, so I'm Nolan Dalla. We're here on When Academics Attack.
I don't think we're in that much
When
disagreement.
academics fight. That's the greatest.
I would completely trade a mask mandate for, more economic circulation and, less having to lock down. And nobody, I think, with any credibility disputes the idea that there are a lot of asymptomatic carriers out there who don't realize that they might be jeopardizing other people, who need to be, gently reminded that they have to be responsible to their fellow citizens. It's been really hard to get that message out. As I mentioned, the attitude towards masks in Michigan was very different from the attitude towards masks in Wisconsin, when I was there. And obviously those are, adjacent states, but there's a lot of variation in people's willingness to do this. And I don't think it's because they're bad people, right? They see the people around them doing it and, right, they take it as social proof.
That same thing happened with seatbelts.
Mm-hmm.
When they started mandating seatbelts, you can't tell me that.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to intervene here. You guys need to get a room and just talk to COVID, okay? Now I'm going to get this thing back on politics. Okay. Hey, nice job there, Matt. Keeping control of the show.
I try.
You guys ready to talk some politics now? All right, let's get back to this. Let's talk about the Senate races, man. By the way, everybody's got 20 seconds, and I'm gonna tear you off the screen if you exceed 20. All right, 30 seconds. All right. 31 seconds, Arthur. Let's talk Senate races, your prediction, any surprises, whatever you want to say. And by the way, when I'm talking, remember the last question I'm going to ask on this show. I want who's going to win the election, the general vote, popular vote, excuse me. Who's going to win the electoral college and perhaps a projection on the numbers. And I want you to give us your biggest surprise. Could be a state, could be a state senate, could be a governor's race, anything you want. I'm going to hold you to those things at the end of the show. So let's get to it. Let's talk South Carolina. This starts with you, Matt Lessinger. Is there any chance that Lindsey Graham loses to Jamie Harrison?
Well, that's not fair. You said the end of the show was going to be the surprise, and now you're making me say it now. So okay. What are you doing? All right.
You want to hold off on that one? It's okay.
Well, the cat's out of the bag. I mean, if there's going to be a surprise, I think that's the one, right? I mean, the betting markets have Lindsey Graham as a 3-1 favorite. And I personally would say there's got to be a better than 1 in 4 shot that Jamie Harrison unseats him. And I have nothing to back that up other than a gut feeling. But just, Lindsey Graham is really taking a hit in the public eye, and I don't think it's getting better on a daily basis. And we'll see. I hope I'm right.
Real quick follow-up. That your gut feeling, you don't bet gut feelings very often here. That's a very conservative state, Matt. Give us more on your gut feeling there.
Oh, I'm not putting my own money on it, so I'm not saying anyone else should either. I mean, I'm just, no, it's just, if he's a 3-1 favorite, do I think there's a better than 1 in 4 shot that Jamie Harrison can win? Yeah, I think there is. Am I going to put any money on it? No, it's just, a feeling that his chances are better than 1 in 4.
Arthur?
I think the big surprise is going to be Georgia where the Democrats win both.
Probably get a runoff in Georgia. We're going to get to that in a minute. Vin?
Probably going to get a runoff, yes.
Yeah. Go ahead on South Carolina. Vin, I'm interested in you. I know you've been looking at that race in South Carolina. You're rubbing your hands together. What do you think?
The amount of outside money in the South Carolina race is insane. And Senator Graham's where's all of this money comes from is so disingenuous. He knows exactly where the money's coming from. That said, I think I think Graham wins, and I think it's one of those Beto O'Rourke things. It's a couple percentage points, but
What do you mean by that? I think I know what you mean, but explain to the audience. What do you mean the Beto O'Rourke thing?
Beto O'Rourke ran a terrific campaign for the Texas Senate, and he fell short, and he fell short by a couple percentage points. It was close. Everyone, I mean, not everyone, but there are a lot of people out there thinking that O'Rourke had a shot to win. And he was going to be the signal that Texas is turning blue and all of that sort of stuff, and it just wasn't the case. And I think that this is going to be the closest Senate election possibly in South Carolina history. But I fully expect Lindsey Graham to win it because he's got more voters, and if you have more voters, you're going to win.
There was just to jump in here on this one. There was an interesting article by a reporter who was interviewing the publisher of the small town newspaper in South Carolina. And he raised the question of Lindsey's sexual orientation. And the publisher of the paper said, "Oh, everybody in South Carolina knows he's gay. We don't care as long as he votes the way we want him to." And then last week, there was this really bizarre thing. Again, I'm with Larry in this one. Sometimes things are so crazy that you just sort of scratch your head and wonder what's going on. But apparently, there were 5 male prostitutes who put out a position statement that Lindsey routinely pays them for their services, and that he's a big tipper. That didn't go anywhere, which makes me think that it's bullshit. But boy, I'm telling you, I think it's just a fascinating issue in South Carolina, because it's like when Nathan Lane, the actor, like someone said to him one day, "Are you gay?" He said, "Well, let's see now. I'm 50 years old. I've never been seen with a woman in any kind of a relationship. What the fuck do you think I am?" And then, of course, he came out as gay, but up to then he hadn't. Frankly, I would be feel much more warmly toward Graham if he had come out years ago and said, "Look, I'm gay. Of course I'm gay, but I'm a solid Republican. I'm going to vote down the line. I'm going to support these issues. But that's fine, and move on from there." So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Well, hypocrisy has never been a disqualifier for public office, that's for sure. Let's go, David Croson. What do you think about South Carolina?
Yeah. So in 20 seconds, I think there are a bunch of diehard Republican voters who are wavering about the top line, but they're not going to turn around and vote D all the way down, right? And so I think that, Trump is going to lose a few percent on South Carolina compared to what he had before, but I think he would be more likely to lose South Carolina than Lindsey Graham would. And so I think that Graham is pretty safe. 3-1 are pretty steep. It's pretty steep chalk to lay, right? So I would agree that, the chance might be higher than 25%, but there's no way that his opponent is favored at this point.
Larry?
I thought the senator did a great job on the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, and it probably reminded the South Carolina voters that he's chairman of the Judiciary Committee and a powerful senator who actually has worked across the aisle on many subjects, but is plenty conservative and knows his state. It is impressive that his opponent raised so much money, but Senator Graham is a very talented senator and a good vote getter, and I think he'll win.
Excellent. I'm going to take these next 2 states together, although they shouldn't be, purely at a time. I'm also going to give a very short editorial report from Larry, someone that you'll know since you live here in Nevada also. And that's there's a political reporter, kind of a legend here, named John Ralston, and the Ralston Report, and he's on PBS here. He is really the man when it comes to Nevada politics. He said something, he tweeted something, I should say, yesterday that really stuck out. He was talking about the turnout in rural Nevada. Now, that doesn't sound like it's a big deal. Like, who lives up in these remote areas where there's the population is very sparse? However, there's some application here to Arizona and some other states too that are supposedly swing states. Arizona is certainly a swing state. Nevada, maybe. The thing that John Ralston said was the turnout was extraordinary, like in red counties, rural counties in Nevada. Same thing also in Arizona. That could be a deciding factor. If those counties, they don't have a lot of people, but if 80% of those people are voting, and then you've got, let's say, long lines in the cities, and it's much easier to vote in these small counties, that could be a factor, not just in Nevada and Arizona, but elsewhere as well. Talk about rural states as we, the rural vote, I should say, and then Arizona and Nevada as well. Who wants to field that first? A lot of there to digest.
Well, I'll jump in. So I'm living in Nevada. There are a lot of influx of Southern Californians into Clark County, so Henderson and Summerlin, and they're leaving a high tax state of California. I think most people acknowledge what's going on from New York and other urban centers post riots. So I have a feeling the Republican vote could grow over time in Nevada. If they stay loyal to the reason they moved out of California, which was the left-wing high taxes. And I also agree that the rural vote is coming out big time if you see the rallies with the president. And I know he was up in the Reno area several times. I didn't think Nevada was in play, but I'll be pleasantly surprised if it is. I know Arizona definitely is in play, and that gets to the McSally Senate race. And she was way behind, if you believe the polls, which I'm not sure I do. The Democratic candidate is a pretty good one. He's an astronaut and the brother-in-law, I believe, of the injured, attempted assassination Gabby Giffords, who recovered, thank God.
He's married to her.
No, it's the brother of the married spouse of Gabby Giffords.
Nope.
Both of the Kelly brothers are astronauts.
That's correct.
And the one who's running for Senate is the brother of the husband of Gabby Giffords, I believe.
No, he's married to her. He's married to her.
What's your projection in that Arizona Senate race, Larry? If you have to bet $5 on it, where do you bet it?
McSally by a vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
David?
So, I mean, the Nevada one's going to be interesting. I think on the Arizona one, and I don't know if this was discussed before I came on the call. My apologies if it is. I think that there is a very real chance, given that Arizona has a Republican governor, and given that the Constitution does not say how states decide how their electors are going to vote, that if the vote is not a runaway for Biden, that the governor is going to intervene and, give electors, propose a slate of electors, which may or may not necessarily reflect the strict majority of the votes which are there. And I think that's going to potentially be in play in a half dozen other states. If it's a landslide in favor of Biden, none of that's going to happen because it wouldn't make any difference. But, if it's close, that is, as far as I can tell, as an outsider, a perfectly legal, if not precedented and legitimate way in order to, have the EC diverge from the popular vote. And so I'd say Arizona is one of the states where that might potentially happen, and Nevada isn't.
By the way, you're right, Arthur. Mark Kelly is the husband of Gabby Giffords. Yes.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to bail out.
You're going to bail out. All right, Arthur.
Go
Thank
make
you for
dinner.
joining us, Arthur Reber.
It's been a lot of fun, and I'm impressed. There are a lot of IQ points on my monitor this evening, and some fabulously insightful.
I would say about 600, over under 600. What do you think? That's the average. That's what it should be.
Vin,
Arthur,
nice to have met you.
Arthur,
David, nice to have met you. The others I've known in a variety of contexts. Nolan,
I got to ask Arthur a question before he leaves, though.
Oh, yeah, go
just
ahead.
real quick. How the fuck did we get here?
What?
How the
What?
fuck did we get here? That's what you're always asking.
How did we get here?
In so many words, yeah. How the F did we get here is what you're always asking.
Oh yeah, oh that's true. My answer is Newt Gingrich.
All right.
Okay.
We're gonna come back to that on another show. Arthur, you live on an island, by the way. No one knows this except maybe some of your close friends.
It's not an island. It's a peninsula.
State. I
No,
mean,
it's a
you're off of the Pacific Ocean. I'm not making that up. That's in fact.
But it's not an island.
All right.
Nolan. It's a peninsula.
Peninsula,
We're attached
excuse
to
me,
Canada.
I stand corrected. I knew an academic.
We only live a few feet from the border with Canada.
All right. Thank you so much,
You
Arthur.
take it
Let's get
over.
on to Vin. Go ahead and give us your analysis of that, and we're going to close with our final predictions. Unless, Arthur, you want to stick around. I guess he doesn't. Go ahead. Go ahead, Vin.
Nevada, I'm going to disagree a little bit with Larry about, I mean, I think the rural vote turning out is a strong sign for Republicans in Nevada. I still expect Democrats to win. The point I'll disagree with Larry a little bit on is I agree you have a lot of Californians who are fleeing a high tax jurisdiction to come into Clark and Summerlin and that sort of thing. I don't necessarily equate that with increased Republican vote or turnout. I think that's sort of a wait and see. You might be right, you might not. They're going to be fairly socially liberal, even if they have, even if they're fleeing a high tax jurisdiction. And so, you know, it might be something that grows over time, or it might just add to the Democratic vote in Clark. I think it's entirely too early sort of to suss that out, because we're not even sure of the demographics that have moved. It's just a lot. It's just a lot of guesswork on that.
Well said. I only raise it because it's my entire political future, so that's why I raise it.
Fair enough.
Just for clarification, just so I'm not missing anything, is there a U.S. Senate seat in Nevada up this term?
No,
or
no.
Yeah, okay.
No.
So we're just talking like at the state Senate level?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
but yeah, but I mean, I do think the rural turnout is going to be big, and when we go to our final prediction, I'll add a little more context to the rural turnout, because I think there's a lot more to that than meets the eye, and it's a lot more important than people realize. But in terms of the Arizona race, I kind of look, Biden's +3. It's, you know, he's within the margin of error, or President Trump is within the margin of error, however you want to look at it. You know, this is going to be a squeaker of the race. I don't know who's going to win the Senate race. You know, if I had to bet, I would bet on the Democrat there, just because it's a terrific candidate and has done a good job mobilizing. And I don't think the incumbent is nearly as popular as people realize. And so, if I had to pick, it would be one. But I think it's going to be razor thin margins. David, I mean, to me, the faithless elector thing is sort of an interesting thing, because the Supreme Court has done some rulings on it recently. You know, hasn't really been in favor of the faithless elector, but I kind of like chaos. I'm pro chaos. So I kind of hope a lot of these things happen. And so
okay, Matt.
Just from a betting markets perspective, because there's a lot of interesting things to note, right? We just said that Lindsey Graham is roughly a 3-1 favorite in South Carolina. As far as Trump's electoral college prospects in South Carolina, he's about a 25-1 favorite. So they don't go hand in hand, right? I mean, South Carolina will almost certainly, that's close to a lock, go for Trump in South Carolina, but the Senate seat, not so much. Arizona, you have exactly the opposite. Arizona is a complete toss-up at the presidential level, with the Biden has a very slight edge. He's like -130, with Trump being even money. But then in the Senate race, Mark Kelly's a 4-1 favorite. So, I don't know what's behind that necessarily, other than just McSally being a particularly unpopular candidate, or Kelly being particularly popular, or what have you. But I'm just going by the betting numbers, that as close as Arizona is for the presidential election, they think very clearly that Kelly's going to win. It's not going to be close.
Well, it's important to note that McSally's never won the popular vote there. She was appointed, and she
Correct.
couldn't even beat the Republican in the primary when she ran. She was a congresswoman. She won that race, but all of her Senate experience has been, failure. So she's never garnered much traction there. So that's certainly her. And then just I think like everyone's noted here, a very strong candidate from the Democrat side. I mean, you can't, even if you don't vote Democratic, you have to say that's a good candidate. So let's just get to our predictions, gentlemen. It's been a long night and a lot of fun, and hopefully very educational, certainly for me. Let's do our forecast now. I'd like to spend more time on these individual races, but we're up against time. So let's go ahead and get to it. I'm going to press you to predict the popular vote, meaning candidate A over candidate B by 3 million, or you can use percentage points if you want. And then if you have an electoral college projection, also if you want to throw in like any editorial comment, like this is going to end up in the Supreme Court or what have you, go ahead and make that prediction. And then finally, I want your biggest surprise of the 2020 election. Can be anything, any topic, any of the races. A lot there to digest. You've got as much time as you want to take with this final answer. This is your final summation, and we are going to play this tape back. So, and it will be there on the internet for everyone to see and laugh at you. So make sure you're right here, okay? Who wants to go first?
I will.
Go ahead, Larry.
So thanks for including me. I've had a great time, and I'm so happy to make friends with you, Matt and Vin, and good to see you again, David. And Nolan, you're the best. Let's start with the Senate. 50-50 is my prediction. I think the Democrats pick up a couple seats, 2 or 3 seats. My big surprise would be that James in Michigan does really well. Black Republican running in Michigan against a fairly quiet Senator, Gary Peters. And so I think that could be a big surprise. I think Tillis holds on in North Carolina. His opponent has scandals. Collins may fall. Gardner may fall in Colorado. Okay, for the presidency, Biden wins the popular vote. He runs up a big lead in the blue states. And as I mentioned, because people have already been voting for a long time, the strength of Trump in the last week, from his second debate to other reasons, I think he's been having a good week, maybe too little too late. He loses the popular vote. I think we don't know what happens on election night. I think it goes to the Electoral College with confusion. There will be lawsuits. There will be battles over did votes match signatures. There'll be battles over did a ballot come in after election night when it wasn't supposed to. There'll be battles for the Supreme Court to review about the states where so far the Supreme Court said we won't rule that you can't receive a ballot after election night, but that still could come up. Maybe it goes so far as to an electoral college without 270, and then it goes to the House. I think we're going to see everything. 2020 is the year of crazy. I think we've only just begun with the crazy. There is a shot that Trump does way better than everybody thinks and the polls picked, and he kind of does great, and there's a red wave. I don't think there'll be a blue wave. And I also think there'll be a surprise that the House won't go as much for the Democrats as people think. Because in 2018, I guess, several Democrats won House seats that Trump had won those seats in 2016. He'd won that district. And I think some of them swing back to the president or to the GOP.
All right. So before we go to the other panelists here, I'm the moderator, so I get the privilege of asking a very quick follow-up. And I'd like you all to incorporate this into your answers. Civil unrest. Some people say civil war if these things, if they turn ugly. Is that possible, Larry?
Yes, we are already seeing it. Beverly Hills is boarding up as we speak. And there are already threats. There's already intimidation. And please don't take this as a partisan comment because I don't mean it that way. But if Trump loses, I think there'll be far less violence and rioting in the streets.
Less violence if Trump loses.
No, I misspoke. If Trump wins, there'll be more rioting and insurrection. If Trump loses, I don't think Republicans in Iowa are going to go crazy. Yeah.
Wow. Bold predictions. Very good. Thank you, Larry. That's why you're here on the show. Terrific. Who wants to go next?
Sure. Okay. Let's all, don't everybody jump in at once. Okay. I think Biden clearly wins the popular vote. I mean, it's not even close. He's a much more, he's a candidate that moderates could get behind a lot better than they could Hillary Clinton. I mean, if Hillary Clinton could win by 3 million votes, I think Biden doubles that advantage. So I think he wins by 6 million votes. What that means for the Electoral College is a lot less predictable. I think I'm with Larry. I mean, I think the Electoral College could be a toss-up. It's definitely not going to be decided on Election Day. I think Trump is going to declare victory every day. I mean, whether it's founded in fact or not, he's just going to continually declare victory. But I agree that this could get tied up in the courts for a while. Um, as we mentioned early in the show, like there is no supporter on either side that should be spiking the ball for 2 months, until until we cross the inauguration day and their candidate is actually sitting in the seat. There's going to be contention until then, whether it's rioting in the streets. Yeah, in certain areas, yeah, probably. I mean, I'm the eternal pessimist, so I mean, I am worried about, worst case scenarios and civil unrest and things like that. I think Trump's threats of sending in the National Guard and things like that are a little inflated because there's only so much National Guard and there's way too many major cities to try to, by the time you send the National Guard one place to try to stifle some sort of unrest, then the unrest is going to be in a different city. I mean, it's just not feasible to try to do that. From the Senate perspective, I think the Democrats pick up 5 seats. I mean, that seems to be the mean in terms of the predictions. It's within the realm of probability that they only win 1 or 2 or 3. It's also within the realm of probability that they win 6, 7, or 8. So, I discussed earlier in the show, like I think Susan Collins will lose. I don't celebrate that in a weird way. I mean, I don't think she's perfect or anything, but in terms of, we need moderate Republicans. And if every moderate Republican gets voted out in this election, I think that's bad in the long run. That might be good in the very short term, but that's certainly not going to help the polarization that's going on here. So, I do bemoan that. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm rooting for him to win, but for her to win rather. I just wish there was like more of a place for moderates to have a seat at the table, which is why, you hope that Joe Biden has some sort of pull in that direction. Can we have another Gang of 8? Can we have, Democrats and Republicans sitting down together, senators and reps, and forming legislation that will make it, to the table and not just get stifled like basically what's happened with Mitch McConnell. I would love to make that my bold prediction that Mitch McConnell goes down, but I mean, I'm not stupid. I mean, he's going to win. I already told you, possibly Jamie Harrison. Vin kind of took the wind out of the sails of that a little bit, and I can't disagree with you. It does seem very reminiscent of Beto O'Rourke. I totally get that. Maybe they could do one better just because there's been even more of a massive influx of cash to his campaign. I mean, if we're talking per capita, how much money has been poured into Jamie Harrison far surpasses Beto O'Rourke. So we'll see what happens. That's basically it. I mean, again, the final thing to take away is do not spike the ball on November 3rd or the day after that or the day after that. This is going to go on for 2 months. It could be a total shit show. I don't embrace anarchy quite as much as some other people. So I hope it can be done in a civil way, against what is the more likely reality that it's not going to be civil, but we'll just have to see what happens.
Excellent. Wow. Hard act to follow. Ben?
Sure, I'll go next. So just want to touch on a few things here. In Maine, the Maine race has been brought up. My bold prediction, sure to go wrong, is Susan Collins will win the popular vote, but she won't win the seat. And the reason why is because Maine does what's known as ranked choice voting. And so there is a third party candidate in Maine that's quite leftist. And so what I think is going to happen is that on the first go around, no one will hit the 50% mark. And then it's going to go to everyone's second choice, and the Democrat will win in Maine. So I think it's very likely that Susan Collins wins the popular vote, but loses the seat in Maine. Larry, I agree with you 100% on the Michigan Senate race. I think we're going to see an upset there. I think the Republican wins there. I just spent some time in Michigan. He is outspending Gary Peters left and right. It's not even close, and it's just present everywhere. And and Gary Peters is just not an exciting candidate. And so I think that said, I think ultimately, I think it's a 51-49. Democrats get the Senate overall. So those are a couple of things on the Senate side. I mean, not in the Senate. For the president, I think Matt, I think you're on. I think a 6 million on the popular vote sounds about spot on for a Biden win. I'm looking, when it's all said and done, Biden getting around 285, 290 on the electoral vote. I'm not sure whether that margin is enough to prevent chaos at the end of it. I sort of think you need around 300, need to hit the 300 mark to prevent chaos at the end of it, but I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know what the magic number is to prevent chaos and that sort of thing. So you've got that going on. My really big surprise, and I alluded to it earlier in the show, is I think the Texas state legislature goes Democrat. I mean, and I'm out on a serious limb here. So if I'm wrong, it wouldn't surprise me, but it wouldn't be a bold prediction to be otherwise. And then a final note, sort of as you're watching Fit for Things on election night, a couple things to keep track of. One is, how's President Trump doing on the Catholic vote? He cleaned up the Catholic vote in 2016. He's lost some of that coming into this. What are the margins like on the Catholic vote for President Trump, especially in swing states? Similarly, how is Biden doing with the African-American and the Latino vote in swing states? Is he underperforming Hillary Clinton? If he is, that's problematic. The next thing to look at is rural white vote. Is Trump overperforming from where he is? Because he needs to. He needs to overperform from 2016 in order to win. And so the question is, by how much? If it's by a small margin, then he's facing some problems. If it's by a large margin, he might be all right. And so those are some of the key factors that you're looking at in terms of how this race is going. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting night. And yeah, I mean, and we're not going to know who wins Tuesday night. It's going to take a while to play out, and that's okay. This is the process. It's messy. It's not perfect, but it's what we've got, and you sort of roll with it. But just because it's messy and it's not perfect doesn't mean it's illegitimate. And I think that's really important to point out, is this is a legitimate election. You know, the electors, the people, the Secretary of State's office in all the states, they make good faith efforts to run really fair elections, and we should give them the credit that they deserve.
Wow, what a great summation there. Do you want it fast, or do you want it done right? I like that. You know,
Yeah.
There will be a rush to get the results and everyone to know Tuesday night what's happening, but it may be several days, weeks, or even a couple of months later. Let's just get it right. That is a great summation there, Vin. Excellent. David Croson, another hard act to follow.
Yep. Well, so, I think that, Biden wins the popular vote seems to be the consensus, and I would definitely agree with that. I don't really have a prediction by how many, but, given how I think few people are going to be voting for President Trump in heavily populated states like New York and California, it could be a telephone number, right? It could be a huge win for the popular vote, because after all, Secretary Clinton did really well in the popular vote despite coming up short in the Electoral College. And I think Biden was favored on the Electoral College too. Remember, there were a lot of states where Trump won by razor thin margins, right? 15,000 votes, 25,000 votes. And I think that, a lot of those could be easily flipped for Biden. We could see, a substantial blue electoral vote pickup. That does not mean to me that the Senate is going to go blue, though. People seem to be betting on an all or nothing blue wave, and I don't think that's a realistic outcome. I think that, Biden can win. I would love for him to win the Electoral College sufficiently convincingly that there is not rioting, particularly in Minneapolis, which I might take kind of personally. I would like for it to be kind of clear cut and have everybody say Vox Populi, right? Trump came in, he was a statistically improbable president, and, now we're kind of back to normal. But, I would hate for something to gum up the works to the point where one side or the other felt like they had their franchise taken away by this election. And I'm concerned about that, right? Both sides kind of have been very aggressive on the idea of saying, we're going to win or else the election will not have been fair. And I think that none of us wins in that category. I would like to see a clear-cut outcome. And if it's going to go to the Supreme Court or something, I'd like it to be on an actual, technical question, as opposed to, he said, she said, or there was cheating in the election. So I want cleanness and I want handshakes after the election more than anything else. And I hope that I'm right.
Thank you, David Croson. Gentlemen, we started this discussion some 3 hours ago. I'm not sure we're that much closer to any revelation. I don't know if those listening, watching have gained a lot of insight. I have. I think each of us in some way has gained as well. I will go back to my own experience, and I've been involved in politics for, 35, 40 years. And I want to say I was wrong about something. I was the person that was somewhat of the revolutionary, the person that bring down the system by any means necessary. I've always, those who read my politics and know me know my, so I've always been called an extremist. I want to say that the one thing that the Donald Trump presidency has taught me and instilled upon me is that we need institutions. We need normality. We need to believe in our leaders. We need to trust our government. We need to trust each other. We need to have faith in each other. If we don't have faith on November 3rd in what happens, we don't have a democracy. We don't have the America that you and I grew up in. That's what we're voting on. That's what we're trying to preserve on November 3rd. And whatever happens, we've got to come together and bring this thing together where we trust each other. And I just hope that we get to some kind of resolution in some way, in some fashion. So with that, I'll close and say thank you to my guests, Matt Lessinger, Larry Greenfield, Vin Narayanan, and David Croson and Arthur Reber, who left us earlier. I'm Nolan Dalla. We do this show once a week, which is an intelligent conversation. I think it's been an intelligent conversation this time. Whatever you do, be sure and vote if you haven't already. And thank you for joining us. We're honored that you would give us your time. And we'll see you next time on an intelligent conversation. Good night.